Chapter 12:25. Roar. The giant head of the evil beast was completely exposed. It looked like a giant island. It opened its mouth and roared, causing waves to soar up to the sky. Such a powerful sound wave! Although the Scarlet Wind warship was an Emperor-grade warship that could withstand the attack of a beginner combat Emperor, and a middle combat Emperor wouldn't be able to break the defensive barrier of the Scarlet Wind warship in a short period of time. However, the roar of the evil beast still shook the Scarlet Wind warship. The pale red defensive barrier kept distorting and deforming, producing a creaking sound that made people's teeth ache. Get down. After the main cannon finished charging, the Scarlet Wind Emperor's thoughts moved, and two beams of red light bombarded the terror beast's head. An earth-shattering sound rang out, but it was unknown if the terror beast was injured. However, the powerful impact caused the terror beast to sink to the bottom of the water. The splashing waves were like flying swords that struck the Scarlet Wind ship's defensive barrier, making paw-paw sounds. Without any hesitation, the Scarlet Wind Emperor controlled the Scarlet Wind warship and flew away at a low altitude. It was an arduous and unrewarding task to fight a middle-level water monster to death. The combat strength of a middle-level water monster was similar to a middle-level Emperor, but its life force was thousands of times stronger than a middle-level Emperor. It was extremely difficult to kill it. Unfortunately, the Scarlet Wind Emperor had miscalculated the difficulty of dealing with the evil beast. In the white mist, a long black shadow broke through the water and flew towards the Scarlet Wind warship. With a bang, the Scarlet Wind warship was sent flying. It eventually hit the surface of the water, sliding and rolling all the way. The black shadow was the tail of the evil beast. It was a few hundred miles long and was covered with a layer of cuticle like the skin of a crocodile. Swoosh! At this moment, a silhouette flew out from the Scarlet Wind warship and slashed at the eye of the evil beast. Poochie! No matter how strong the evil beast was, it only had the strength of a middle-level Emperor. It only had a strong life force. The one who attacked was Yi Chen. After casting momentary brilliance, he instantly opened up a deep bloody hole on the left eye of the evil beast. Countless sword chi formed a spiral shape and sliced at the evil beast. Roar! Feeling the pain, the terror beast unceasingly slapped the heavenly river's surface. All of a sudden, a boundless white mist rose up like thick smoke, making one unable to see their own fingers in front of them. However, the terror beast was not affected by the white mist, and its tail accurately lashed out at Yi Chen. Troublesome! Yi Chen frowned. In the Milky Way, his soul power was restricted by the fog and could only spread out a small area. Only when the tail was about to reach him did he react. Clang! The flying heaven sword swept horizontally, and Yi Chen firmly blocked the tail of the terror beast. However, the tail's power couldn't be removed, and it sent Yi Chen flying backward into the river. This is the water of the heavenly river. It's so cold. The moment he entered the bottom of the heavenly river, Yi Chen's first reaction was cold, and his second reaction was still cold. This kind of cold was not only on his body, but also on his soul. It seemed like even his thoughts were frozen. Moreover, as the depth increased, the temperature of the river plummeted. There were even white ice crystals forming on Yi Chen's body. However, what made Yi Chen feel strange was that his vision was not restricted at the bottom of the heavenly river. Although his soul power was slightly restricted, it was not as big as above. He could see the scene tens of thousands of li away. He saw other water beasts. Based on their body shape, they were all low-grade water beasts. They didn't compete with the evil beast above for food. Moreover, at the bottom of the river, these water beasts were very lazy. They swam very slowly, and their eyes were very dull. Too cold. When he reached 1,000 meters deep, he started to feel that he couldn't bear the cold anymore. If he continued, he might be frozen and fall into an eternal slumber. Fortunately, the power on his body had disappeared. Yi Chen operated his Zhen Yuan and rushed up. The ice crystals on his body also shattered and fell off. Boom! The water column exploded and Yi Chen rushed out. Facing him was still the evil beast's tail. The heavenly river was the territory of the water beast. They could easily observe their movements, but not Yi Chen. Open! A silver light flickered between his eyebrows as Yi Chen opened his soul eyes. Once he opened his soul eyes, the situation became much better. His vision could see more than 1,000 li away. The flying heaven sword clashed with the evil beast's tail. Yi Chen borrowed the force and moved hundreds of li away as if he was weightless. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen performed his strongest sword art at the evil beast, Doomsday Meteor Sword. The flying heaven sword was like a huge fire god sword as it slashed out. The huge sword light was many times bigger than the evil beast's body. The evil beast couldn't dodge at all, and was directly hit by the meteor-like sword light. Swoosh! Black blood burst out. The center of the evil beast's body was cut open. Its internal organs were black like the blood. Only that huge inner Dan was white, as pure as the heavenly river's water. However, the evil beast didn't die after receiving this attack. Its body sank, and it was about to sink into the water. Where are you going? How could Yi Chen let go of this opportunity? The Doomsday Meteor Sword had used up 1/3 of his sword energy. If he didn't get anything out of it, it would be a waste. Taking a deep breath, Yi Chen performed the Doomsday Meteor Sword again. The sword energy in his body was instantly reduced by half. With a rumbling sound, the heavenly river's water was cut open, and the evil beast's body was cut into 4 pieces. The violent Doomsday Sword Chi wreaked havoc, killing the evil beast's vitality. After struggling for a while, the evil beast finally died completely. It floated on the river's surface, and its black blood dyed the water black. With a gentle push, Yi Chen landed on the evil beast's body. With a wave of his hand, a white inner Dan the size of a small mountain flew over. By the time it reached his hand, it had shrunk to the size of a bowl. Waves of white light surged around it, and essence surged. The inner Dan of a mid-ranked water monster was worth 1 billion essence stones. It was more or less enough to replenish Yi Chen's sword energy thrice. Of course, Yi Chen himself had lost 2/3 of his sword energy. When he left, Yi Chen discovered dozens of low-ranked water monsters rushing over, fighting over the evil beast's corpse. The black blood seemed to be nourishing to them, and they fought over it crazily. In just a short while, the evil beast's mountain-sized body was snatched clean. The river's surface also recovered its white color, without a trace of impurities. Revealing a pensive expression, Yi Chen didn't go and kill them. The fog here was too thick. If he didn't leave now, he would sink deeper and deeper. Moreover, he could faintly sense a horrifying aura attacking him. Yi Chen, what happened to the evil beast? Seeing that Yi Chen had returned to the Scarlet Wind, the Scarlet Wind Emperor asked. Dead. Yi Chen took out the evil beast's inner Dan. Mid-ranked inner Dan. It's indeed dead. Impressive. You've just entered the 7th layer of life and death realm, and you already have the strength to contend against high-ranked emperors. Perhaps in a few years, when you enter the 8th layer, you'll be an invincible existence under Supremes. The Scarlet Wind Emperor raised his thumb. Although he was at the 8th layer of life and death realm, his strength was far inferior to Yi Chen's. He was only equivalent to an ordinary emperor. A while after the Scarlet Wind ship left, an even bigger head appeared. This head's eyes were much bigger than the evil beast's, and its body was completely hidden in the river. Time flowed like the water of the heavenly river. Unknowingly, 2 years had passed. During this year, the group didn't find any heavenly river islands. They were extremely rare and not that easy to find. However, they did obtain a lot of low-ranked Inner Dawn and mid-ranked Inner Dawn, which were better than nothing. On this day, the 5 of them observed an island far away from where they were. It's an island! Fire Sparrow Emperor and Snow Air Emperor were pleasantly surprised. A joyful expression flickered on Stone Emperor's face as he smiled bitterly. That's a modified island for trading. There's no harm in going there. Who knows, we might be able to trade for something good. Chapter 12:26. There were many experts roaming in the Milky Way. It could be said that the Milky Way was the largest secret realm in the universe. Even Supremes would come here to search for treasures. After a long time, someone came up with an idea to build trading points on some of the islands that had already been mined. After all, there were some things that you didn't need, but others did. You could exchange things you didn't need for things you needed. That way, everyone would be happy. Of course, there weren't always people at the trading points. The Milky Way was too big, and there were many trading points. The experts who came here might not appear at the same time. Therefore, if you were unlucky, there might be no one at the trading point. Apart from that, there was another kind of situation. That was greed. Every year, there would be a large number of experts who didn't die in the hands of the water monsters, but died in the hands of other experts. This kind of thing was not uncommon. However, everyone was already used to it. In the universe, the strong preyed on the weak. It wasn't just the Milky Way, other places weren't safe either. The only thing that could make one safe was strength, cautiousness, and some luck. No one. Yi Chen's group of 5 didn't have good luck. The island was empty. The hall that was originally used for trading was covered in dust. It seemed like no one had been here for a long time. After a casual observation, Yi Chen frowned slightly. He had vaguely sensed a trace of the power of a formation. With a trace of vigilance, Yi Chen opened his eye of the soul and began to investigate seriously. Leave quickly. This is a trap. Suddenly, Yi Chen waved his hand. Boundless sword energy swept out and wrapped around the 4 of them as they soared into the sky. Haha, where are you going? Stay here. Colorful light shields lit up in all directions. These light shields were densely packed and stacked on top of each other, forming a hemispherical light shield that covered the entire island. At the same time, colorful dark clouds started to appear above everyone's heads. In the dark clouds, 5 colored lightning condensed and produced earth-splitting noises. Small 5 elemental lightning formation. What a good move. The Scarlet Wind Emperor had a grave expression. The small 5 elemental thunderlight array was a combination of attack and sealing. The higher the strength of the person who set it up, the more powerful the array would be. Although it was a small 5 elemental thunderlight array, it was divided into 3 stages. The primary stage, small 5 elemental thunderlight array, required 480 million primal stones to set up and could completely seal several primary stage Emperor Realm experts. The intermediate stage, small 5 elemental thunderlight array, required 1.28 billion primal stones to set up and could seal several intermediate stage Emperor Realm experts. This kind of magic array was classified as a top-secret magic array. The number of people who knew how to set it could be counted on one hand. Although the human race had magic arrays that were not weaker or even stronger than this one, they did not have the small 5 elements lightning array. The master of this magic array was the 3 ultimate supremes of the demons. The supremes of the 3 absolutes had 3 absolutes, and formations were one of them. The stone puppet emperor stared at the 5 colored clouds above him and said, "The minor 5 elemental lightning formation's lightning is endless. If we cannot break the formation, we will die sooner or later." That's right. Since it dares to call itself the 5 elements, to a certain extent, it is already an independent world. The Snow Air Emperor said worriedly, "Watch as I burn it." The Fire Sparrow Emperor opened his mouth, and a fire dragon whizzed out, rushing towards the 5 colored clouds. Crack! Following the flow of energy, a 5-colored lightning struck down, landing on the fire dragon. The fire dragon was like a living thing, turning into ashes. Doesn't seem easy to deal with. Yi Chen's soul eye saw clearly that the 5-colored lightning had directly destroyed the fire dragon. Normally, fire dragons were made of energy, so they could not be destroyed. At most, they would just disperse. From the name of the magic array, this lightning should have been infused with the profound meaning of the 5 elements. It was the 5 elements lightning. Crack! The 5 colored clouds became denser and denser, turning chaotic. The 5 colored lightning was like a group of snakes, gathering in the depths of the clouds. All of a sudden, a hole appeared in the clouds, and a waist-thick 5 colored lightning struck down. Along the way, the 5 colored lightning turned into a 5 colored dragon, roaring. Break! The Scarlet Wind Emperor waved the iron fan in his hand, and a tricolored light shot out, colliding with the 5 colored divine dragon. With a rumble, a mushroom cloud spread out, and the 5 colored divine dragon and the tricolored light perished together. Such power! The Scarlet Wind Emperor was slightly shocked. A 5 colored lightning could actually cancel out his secret art. If there were 10 or 20 of them, he would not be able to block them at all. Fortunately, they had Yi Chen here, or else they would definitely die. I will look for the flaws of the magic array. The Snow Air Emperor was quite knowledgeable about magic arrays. Even if she found the flaws of the magic array, she would not be able to break it with her strength. Unfortunately, the person who set up the magic array did not know that Yi Chen's strength could not be judged by cultivation. The small 5 elements lightning light magic array could trap several intermediate Emperor warriors, but Yi Chen was much stronger than several intermediate Emperor warriors. Crack! Crack! This time, 3 5-colored lightning struck down, turning into 3 divine dragons. Let me! Yi Chen pulled out the flying heaven sword and performed moment of glory. Poochie! The 3 divine dragons were instantly shattered, and the sword Chi's remaining power did not dissipate. It pierced into the clouds, and with a crackling sound, a big hole appeared in the 5-colored clouds, as if the sky had been pierced through. In the magic array, a person exclaimed in surprise. Someone next to him said, "This person's combat ability is very high. He can actually pierce through the 5 elemental clouds. This is not something an ordinary intermediate Emperor warrior can do. Only a high-level Emperor warrior can have such attack power." No worries. If it was just a magic array, it should not be able to do anything to him. But with us in charge, he will not be able to escape even if he grows wings. A person in the middle was full of confidence. It was a young man. He was the last disciple of the 3 absolutes of the demons, the Demon Array Emperor. He had inherited the 3 absolutes Array Dao. Among the young Emperor warriors, he could be considered an influential figure. This small 5 elements lightning light magic array was one of the magic arrays he was most proficient in. As a disciple of the 3 absolutes, he was not a person who just copied everything. After learning the essence of the small 5 elements lightning light magic array, he used his imagination and used 5 people to set up the magic array. Everyone had to be proficient in one of the 5 elements, and it would be better if 2 or more of them were proficient. This way, the magic array would have more flaws, but its power would be stronger and more terrifying. Kill the enemy quickly, metal attack. The Demon Array Emperor shouted and waved his hand. The next moment, a 5-colored lightning with golden light blasted at Yi Chen. Wood attack. Water attack. Fire attack. Earth attack. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, the 5 elements combine into one, chaos thunder. 5 types of lightning with the same color but different texture struck at Yi Chen. Then, the 5 types of lightning started to fuse, turning into huge thunderballs. These thunderballs were completely chaotic in color. Even before they struck down, it gave people the illusion that they were going to split the sky and earth, exploding everything. It was as if these were thunder that came from chaos. If they were perfectly fused, I would naturally not be his opponent. But this kind of lightning cannot do anything to me. The true chaos thunder was a supreme martial art, a supreme thunder art. Even 100 Yi Chens would be annihilated. However, that was the method of a supreme being. Break. If chaos thunder was the thunder that split the sky and earth, then the Doomsday Meteor Sword was the sword art of the end of the world. Once the sword was unleashed, everything would perish and decay. Chapter 12:27. The lightning ball and the meteor sword light clashed. In the next moment, a faint crack appeared. This was a spatial crack. Normally, only a battle between peak emperors could tear the space apart. Yi Chen was still some distance away from peak emperors. However, the Doomsday Meteor Sword and Primal Chaos Lightning Ball had a special nature, so it wasn't hard to understand why they would create spatial cracks. The appearance of the spatial crack caused the entire space to shake. The yuan qi of the heaven and earth turned chaotic, showing signs of going berserk. Found it! Emperor Shui Kong formed hand seals, searching for the weak point of the minor 5 elemental thunder light array. It had to be said that the minor 5 elemental thunder light array was practically flawless. Even if it had a weak point, it was not something that a titled monarch like Emperor Shui Kong, who had yet to become an emperor, could detect. Even if Emperor Shui Kong had done some research on arrays, the appearance of the spatial crack, no, to be exact, it was Yi Chen's attack on the Great Array that had caused the Great Array's operation to pause for a moment. It was precisely this slight pause that Emperor Shui Kong caught. He hurriedly took out a small array flag from his storage ring, and with a flick of his hand, inserted it into the weak point of the Great Array. This array flag was no ordinary item, but a formation-breaking flag. Its value was no less than a low-grade Emperor-grade weapon. With the existence of the array flag, the minor 5 elemental thunderlight array's operation would have to pass through the array flag. In other words, the array flag had already fused with the minor 5 elemental thunderlight array, becoming a part of it. It could be described as a tumor. Finding the weak point would make breaking the formation much easier. Of course, if they relied on Yi Chen to forcefully break the formation, their attacking power wouldn't be enough. Not good. Demon Array Emperor's face turned ashen. Originally, he had the confidence to exhaust Yi Chen's group of 5 to death by relying on the formation. However, with the Snow Air Emperor's existence, this plan was ruined. Let's go. Without any hesitation, Demon Array Emperor took the lead and left the Great Formation, rapidly flying away from the island. He still had self-awareness and knew that he wasn't Yi Chen's opponent. Once the latter broke out of the formation, the 5 of them wouldn't be able to stop him. With a huge bang, the formation collapsed. As for the 5, they had long since left the place. They're lucky they ran fast. The Scarlet Wind Emperor was extremely depressed. They had been trapped in the formation for no reason at all. If not for Yi Chen, they would have died without even their ashes remaining. His heart was extremely sullen. Taking out an elementary inner core, Yi Chen replenished his lost sword energy. He glanced at the direction that the Demon Formation Emperor and the others fled to. If he was alone, he wouldn't mind chasing after them. However, this was the Heavenly River. It was inconvenient to communicate with each other and it would be easy to get separated. The Heavenly River had no year, moon, or day, but it had endless flowing water. The river flowed at an extremely fast speed, and it possessed the property of spatial fluctuations. Often, it would travel hundreds or even thousands of light years without anyone noticing. Of course, spatial fluctuations didn't happen all the time. There was a pattern to it. The time of the tide was the peak of spatial fluctuations, and it was very difficult to encounter it during normal times. On this day, as the tide rose, the scenery around the Scarlet Wind immediately became blurry. The next moment, the world spun and the Scarlet Wind arrived at an archipelago. An archipelago? The Flamingo Emperor cried out in alarm. In the Celestial River domain, encountering an island was already a fortunate thing, but encountering an archipelago was a sign of great luck. It was possible that one would never encounter an archipelago in their entire lives. It is indeed an archipelago. The Stone Man Emperor revealed a smile and let out a sigh of relief. In the blink of an eye, they had drifted on the Heavenly River for almost 2 years. If they still couldn't find the Imperial Spirit Route, he had the thought of returning home. After all, He couldn't let Yi Chen and the others keep drifting on the heavenly river with him. Maybe we can find the Imperial Spirit route this time. The Scarlet Wind Emperor and the Snow Air Emperor smiled. Although it was called an archipelago, the number of islands was actually limited. There were 8 in total. The 2 larger islands were the closest to each other, while the other 6 guarded the 2 larger islands. Among the 8 islands, 7 of them were lush and full of life. The last island was a volcanic island, and the smell of sulfur spread far and wide. However, what disappointed the 5 was that this archipelago seemed to have been visited before. There weren't many precious primordial spirit herbs, and even if there were some, their age was very young. It seemed that they had only grown in the last 1,000 years and weren't very useful. Let's go to the volcanic island and have a look. Soon, the 5 of them had searched the 7 lush islands and decided to search the last one, the volcanic island. The 5 didn't know the growing environment of the Imperial Spirit route. Perhaps the volcanic island still had a glimmer of hope. Arriving at the volcanic island, the Snow Air Emperor couldn't help but cough a few times. The smell of sulfur here was too dense, and different from ordinary sulfur. The sulfur on the volcanic island carried an intense fire poison that could instantly kill any king under the 6th layer of life and death realm. Although it couldn't kill the 5, it wouldn't feel good either. Only the Fire Sparrow Emperor wasn't affected. She was a fire attribute demonic beast, the descendant of the phoenix. She naturally liked places with fire. After searching for a while, the 5 still didn't find anything. Eventually, their gazes landed on the active volcano at the center of the island. "We can only enter the volcano," the Snow Air Emperor said. "I'll lead the way." The Fire Sparrow Emperor soared into the sky and turned into a line of fire, shooting toward the active volcano. Yi Chen and the others followed behind her. The active volcano was huge, tens of thousands of meters tall, and immeasurably deep. The fiery mouth at the top was like a fiery abyss, making one's heart tremble with fear. Waves of heat rose up, bringing up thousands of meters of pale red chi flow. Yi Chen gave it a try. Merely the pale red chi flow could melt a heavenly king-grade artifact. Yi Chen wondered if the emperor-grade artifact would also be melted if he went deeper. This place naturally contained extreme fire profound, poison profound, yang profound, and earth profound. Along with the pale red chi flow, a red figure suddenly shot out and attacked the Fire Sparrow Emperor. Courting death. The Fire Sparrow Emperor spat out a fire dragon, using fire to fight fire. The phoenix flames were the strongest flames in the world. The red figure was clearly a fire monster, but it was unable to block the phoenix flames. It cried out miserably as it was burned. The 5 of them looked carefully and saw that it was a fire monster that looked like a crow. Poochie! The flame extinguished, and the fire monster was burned to ashes, leaving behind a red crystal. Holding it in his hand, the Fire Sparrow Emperor said, "This is also a beast dan." The beast dan of a fire monster wasn't very big. It couldn't compare to the beast dan of a low-level water monster, and its effect was much weaker. But different from the water monster dan, the fire monster dan had an element, so it wasn't suitable for people who didn't cultivate fire element arts. With the Fire Sparrow Emperor leading the way, the 5 went deeper and deeper. Along the way, more and more fire monsters appeared. At first, there were fire monsters that looked like crows, and they had the strength of 3-star generals. Later, 3-headed firebirds appeared. 3-legged firebirds had the strength of 5-star generals. Continuing down, human-faced bird monsters suddenly appeared. These human-faced bird monsters were no weaker than low-tier water monsters, and they had the strength of low-tier emperors. Although the Fire Sparrow Emperor was a descendant of the phoenix and could naturally suppress fire element beasts, the difference was still the difference. Therefore, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and Yi Chen had to take the lead. Chapter 12:28. The volcano was 30,000 meters high, and Yi Chen's group gradually went deeper. Due to the powerful updraft, their speed was not fast. After half a cup of tea's time, they had only reached 6,000 meters from the bottom. The color has changed. The updraft turned from light red to dark red. 3,000 meters from the bottom, the color changed again, turning scarlet. At 3,000 meters, the scarlet color turned black. When they reached the bottom of the volcano, the color of the airflow had turned black, and the origin of the airflow was the black magma at the bottom of the volcano. Although it was called magma, the strange thing was that the temperature around the magma was very low. The ground was covered in black ice, and when one stepped on it, the bone-chilling cold immediately drilled in like little snake. Strange, there is actually bone-chilling magma, so why is the updraft hot? Snow Air Emperor could not figure it out. She cultivated an ice attribute art, and although she still felt a little uncomfortable, it was not a big deal. Stone Emperor bent down and touched the black ice. Gotcha. It seemed that he did not use Zhen Yuan to protect himself, and his palm immediately turned into a black ice sculpture. When Stone Emperor circulated his Zhen Yuan to expel it, his palm instantly shattered. This black ice was extremely tyrannical, and once frozen, it would be impossible to expel the cold qi. Stone Emperor circulated his undying body, and his palm recovered. He sighed and said, "If I guessed correctly, this is the legendary 9 nether cold ice, which can freeze everything in the world. Moreover, it is divided into 9 grades. If it was high-grade 9 nether cold ice, we would have been frozen and shattered the moment we landed." 9 nether cold ice? It was Yi Chen's first time hearing about such a strange thing, and from Stone Emperor's tone, it seemed to be very frightening. Stone Emperor explained, "I'm afraid you all do not know this, but in the ancient era, this Sky River was not only called Sky River, but also 9 nether yellow spring, which connects to Hell. Legend has it that Hell has ice and fire. The ice is the 9 nether cold ice, and the fire is the hell fire. Being sealed by the 9 nether cold ice, even the soul would be frozen and turned into powder. This is not possible, right? Is there really a hell?" The Scarlet Wind Emperor had a look of disbelief. The Fire Sparrow Emperor looked at the Scarlet Wind Emperor with disdain and said, "Although I haven't seen any information about hell, my Phoenix clan has heard of hell since ancient times. It is said that one of my Phoenix clan's primogenitors entered hell, but there was no news of them afterwards. However, another primogenitor said that the primogenitor who entered hell had already fallen. Hell was a synonym for mystery and terror in every race. It was just that no one had ever entered hell before. Perhaps some people had entered hell before, just like the ancestors of the Phoenix race, but none of them had ever come out. Naturally, there was a lack of evidence. Then why is there 9 hells frozen ice here? 9 hells frozen ice should only appear in hell." Snow Air Emperor asked. Yi Chen guessed, "Perhaps this is an entrance to hell." Entrance? Hearing Yi Chen's words, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others couldn't help but take a step back. They didn't want to enter hell. Not to mention anything else, just the black lava alone was unbearable. Stone Emperor said, "There are many entrances to hell. Every living world has a blood-weeping ghost region. It's said that it's a small projection of hell, and those with great abilities can find the entrance. As for the depths of Heavenly River, there is a barrier that can only be seen after reaching a certain depth. If you want to enter, it'll be much more difficult. You'll have to break the barrier in order to enter, and that's Yellow Spring. Yellow Spring and Heavenly River are 2 sides of the same coin." Yi Chen faintly nodded. Elysium indeed had a blood-weeping ghost region, and Yi Chen had entered it once. However, it was very desolate, and there wasn't anything that Yi Chen needed. Therefore, Yi Chen hadn't entered again. For some reason, Yi Chen thought of the blood-severing ghost finger he had obtained in Dragon God's celestial palace. This thing was very strange. Once cultivated to greater completion, a ghostly shadow would appear behind one's back. Moreover, this ghostly shadow didn't seem to be illusory, and seemed to have its own thoughts. Yi Chen had once seen this ghostly shadow reveal an eerie smile. A long time ago, Yi Chen had stopped using the blood-severing ghost finger. Apart from discovering the flaws of the technique, the ghostly shadow was also too strange. Although the five had determined this was the entrance to hell, they didn't intend to return empty-handed. They began to search the surroundings for treasures. This seems to be the 9 hells frozen ice pearl. Soon, the Snow Air Emperor found the first treasure. Yi Chen looked over and saw that the Snow Air Emperor was holding a dark green pearl in his hand. The cold chi inside the pearl was restrained, but the aura emitted from it still caused ice to form on the Snow Air Emperor's palm. Fortunately, the Snow Air Emperor had already circulated his Zhen Yuan, and the cold chi was isolated outside of his Zhen Yuan. Therefore, his hand wasn't injured. 9 hells frozen ice pearl was a treasure on the same level as the darkness god crystal. After pouring Zhen Yuan into it and throwing it out, it could create a cold chi whirlpool. Under Emperor Realm, almost no one could escape from it. Soon Yi Chen also found a 9 hells frozen ice pearl. 9 hells frozen ice pearl was the essence of 9 hells frozen ice. Yi Chen didn't dare to be careless, so he circulated his sword Yuan and picked it up. This thing was useless to him, but he could give it to the people around him. The more the better. The volcanic area was tens of thousands of meters wide. 9 hells frozen ice pearls were usually hidden in the 9 hells frozen ice. It was hard to scan with soul power, so one could only search with their eyes. After half a day, Yi Chen had collected a total of 10 9 hells frozen ice pearls. No more. Let's leave. After searching for a while, the Stone Emperor suggested. All right. Everyone nodded. This place was too cold. Even with the protection of Zhen Yuan, it wouldn't feel good after a long time. Just as they were about to leave, Yi Chen suddenly saw a black human figure in the black lava. This black human figure climbed out of the black lava and stuck close to the ground, silently shooting towards the Snow Air Emperor who was the closest to it. Watch out! Yi Chen instantly pulled out his flying sword and threw out a beam of sword chi. Swoosh! The black shadow was split into 2. However, not only did the 2 halves of the shadow not die, they even dashed towards Emperor Shui Kong at an even faster speed. Emperor Shui Kong's figure suddenly stopped, and soon after, his eyes began to turn black, and the whites of his eyes disappeared. In Yi Chen's previous life, he had always heard people talk about being possessed by ghosts. Now it was his first time seeing it for himself. Shui, are you okay? The Scarlet Wind Emperor hurried to the Snow Air Emperor's side and grabbed her shoulders. The Snow Air Emperor smiled weirdly. His eyes turned into 2 black whirlpools as he stared at the Scarlet Wind Emperor. The Scarlet Wind Emperor only felt a wave of coldness pouring down from the top of his head. In the next second, his expression became sluggish. Don't get close to them. Let me do it. Yi Chen warned the Stone Emperor and the Fire Sparrow Emperor as he carefully walked over. As he approached, the Snow Air Emperor suddenly turned his head and stared at Yi Chen with his black eyes. Destroy! Yi Chen roared as his destruction sword intent burst out of his body. Whoosh! A cold wind spread out, and the surrounding temperature dropped even more. Chapter 12:29. The Immortal Sword Intent was invulnerable to all evils, while the Destruction Sword Intent was even more tyrannical, able to destroy any form of existence. According to Yi Chen's understanding, ghosts were a special kind of soul, and the Destruction Sword Intent could definitely harm or even destroy them. Pop! Behind the Snow Air Emperor, half of a black shadow's body was blown out, with green smoke rising from its body. However, this shadow was very tenacious. After the Destruction Sword Intent dispersed, it once again entered the Snow Air Emperor's body. Unfortunately, Yi Chen would not give it the chance to control the Snow Air Emperor's body again. Yi Chen's right hand reached out like lightning, pressing on the Snow Air Emperor's shoulder. In the next second, the Immortal Sword Intent, which was different from the Destruction Sword Intent, poured into the Snow Air Emperor's body. He did not dare to use the Destruction Sword Intent, because while it would kill the shadow, it would also cause unimaginable damage to the Snow Air Emperor. The shadow tasted pain this time. Although the immortal sword intent was not as tyrannical as the destruction sword intent, it still had the effect of suppressing ghosts. In the blink of an eye, the immortal sword intent filled the Snow Air Emperor's body, forcing the shadow out. The holy white light ignited the shadow's body. Die! His left hand turned into a claw, and Yi Chen reached into the shadow's body, bursting out the destruction sword intent. Buzz! The sharp black ripple spread out, and the shadow suddenly became blurry, almost disappearing. As the shadow tried to escape, Yi Chen's right hand followed, also reaching into the shadow's body. Under the attack of the two destruction sword intents, the shadow let out a silent howl before disappearing completely. What happened? The Snow Air Emperor and the Scarlet Wind Emperor woke up at the same time. The Scarlet Wind Emperor was only confused for a second, not as badly as the Snow Air Emperor. The Stone Man Emperor let out a breath of relief. Just now, hearing the Stone Man Emperor's explanation, the Snow Air Emperor and the Stone Man Emperor both had cold sweat. They did not think that they would encounter such a strange thing here. Now, the Scarlet Wind Emperor was starting to believe that there were ghosts and hell in this world. I can't stay here for long. I should leave first. Yi Chen had a new understanding of ghosts. In the world he was in, there was no proof of the existence of ghosts. But even if ghosts did exist, they would not be this powerful. One had to know that the Snow Air Emperor and the Scarlet Wind Emperor were not ordinary people. Their bodies contained a powerful aura, and these kinds of evil ghosts could not even get close to them. However, this black shadow was able to invade the Snow Air Emperor's body in an instant and control his mind. Then, it confused the Scarlet Wind Emperor the moment their eyes met. If not for Yi Chen having the Destruction Sword intent and the Immortal Sword intent, he might not have been able to save the two of them. Following the flow of air, the five of them flew toward the crater. Along the way, Yi Chen vaguely felt that his body had passed through something. A seal. Yi Chen speculated. Only a seal could explain why there was a bone-chilling cold below and a scorching heat above. Only a seal could explain why there were no ghosts in the outside world, but only this place. Of course, all of this was still uncertain. The heavenly river was boundless, and there might be ghosts that left this place and wandered around. Not long after Yi Chen and the others left, a black shadow suddenly emerged from the black magma. This black shadow slowly floated above the black magma, and a black substance slid off its body. Not long after, a lifeless face was revealed. Its eyes had no pupils and were deathly pale, which was horrifying. The Scarlet Wind ship rode the wind and waves, shuttling above the heavenly river. Unknowingly, Yi Chen and the others arrived at the intersection of a 5th-grade tributary and a 4th-grade tributary. At the center of the intersection, the waves were towering. If one were to get closer, they would discover that there was a huge whirlpool there. This whirlpool was unimaginably huge, and there were layers upon layers of it. It was even bigger than a galaxy. Anyone below the Supreme Being level would face life-threatening danger if they tried to pass through here. There's an island there. What surprised the five of them was that there was actually a small island at the edge of the intersection point. This island was not very far from the whirlpool, but it was not very close either. The island was surrounded by reefs, and it was very tall. The monstrous waves could only hit the sides of the island, and were unable to completely submerge this isolated island. The edge of the intersection is still relatively safe. Let's go and take a look, the Stone Emperor suggested. Yi Chen and the others had no objections. They had finally found an island, but they would definitely regret it if they went and took a look. The island seemed very close, but time and space were unpredictable above the heavenly river. Sometimes it seemed close, but it was actually very far. Sometimes it seemed very far, but it could be reached with a single step. After a full day and night, the Scarlet Wind ship finally reached the shore. What a terrifying heaven-earth Yuan Qi! When they arrived at the island, the five were shocked by the heaven-earth yuan qi. The density of the heaven-earth yuan qi here was beyond imagination. There were layers of clouds in the sky, which were condensed from the heaven-earth yuan qi. The rain of heaven-earth yuan qi nourished the flowers and trees on the island. As far as the eye could see, there were spirit grasses everywhere. Even the most common weeds were superior grade. Of course, the five of them had high standard. They wouldn't be interested in ordinary spirit grasses. Only monarch spirit grasses and above could enter their eyes. Extreme young wood. Profound een grass. 7-colored divine fruit. 5 elements flower. Leaving aside the monarch spirit grasses, there were many monarch spirit grasses on the island. After a short while, Yi Chen found 4 stalks of monarch spirit grasses. Extreme yang wood and profound een grass were mid-grade monarch spirit grasses. With the 2 of them, one's yin yang qi would be more harmonious, which was quite useful in improving the spirit body. Yi Chen's current spirit body was at the early stage of the 7th rank. With the extreme yang wood and profound een grass, along with some other materials, he had a certain degree of confidence in breaking through to the mid-stage of the 7th rank. One had to know that the higher one's spirit body was, the harder it was to improve. Except for body refinement monarchs, after reaching the 7th rank, every step forward would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens, requiring the assistance of extremely precious treasures. However, treasures weren't cabbages that could be easily obtained. Moreover, he had used the extreme yang wood and profound een grass this time. The next time he used these 2, it wouldn't have any effect, and he would have to use more precious treasures. As for the 7-colored divine fruit and the 5 elements flower, one was a high-grade monarch spirit grass, while the other was a supreme-grade monarch spirit grass. The 7-colored divine fruit was a rare treasure that could strengthen one's yuan spirit. As for how much it could strengthen, it depended on the age of the 7-colored divine fruit. This 7-colored divine fruit grew on the ground, and it was at least 100,000 years old. It could make Yi Chen's yuan spirit more condensed, and once the yuan spirit grew stronger, his talent in martial arts would also improve. The 5 elements flower contained the profound of the 5 element. Observing the 5 elements flower might allow one to comprehend a supreme martial art that integrated the profound of the 5 elements, which was equivalent to ascending to the heavens in a single step. Unknowingly, the 5 of them arrived at the center of the island. At this moment, the 5 of them stopped. There was a glacier in the center of the island, which looked rather strange and out of place with the environment of the island. Yi Chen was about to activate his soul eye to see through the glacier. Crack! Cracks spread out on the glacier, and the cracks grew larger and larger, spreading in all directions. Eventually, the entire glacier shattered, and there was an icy white ball of light in the center. Let's go. Yi Chen had a bad feeling. He could clearly see a figure sitting in the icy white ball of light. This figure's aura was restrained, but the pressure he emitted was much stronger than that of the Golden Spear Marshal. He was at least a peak martial emperor, or even a quasi-venerable. It was best to run as far as possible when encountering such an expert on the heavenly river. Even if he was from the human race, he couldn't be careless. Where are you going? The icy white ball of light shrank and merged into the body of an old man with a cold expression. He reached out his right hand and made a grabbing motion. The time and space started to shrink, and Yi Chen and the other 4, who had flown far away, were like small fish swimming against the current. They were instantly caught in the old man's palm. It was as if his right hand was a world of its own, an ancient mountain, and the 5 of them couldn't move at all. This was not something a peak martial emperor could do. This was definitely a quasi-venerable. Chapter 1230. This is a quasi-sovereign? Yi Chen's strength was at the peak among high-grade emperors, but compared to peak emperors, he was several times weaker. Compared to a quasi-sovereign, the gap was immeasurable. However, he didn't expect the gap to be this huge. The opponent could easily grab the 5 of them with a single hand. It was like the Buddha's 5-finger mountain. Sword domain and sword yuan erupted at the same time. Yi Chen shouted and tried to break free from the opponent's grasp. The old man was slightly surprised. The power Yi Chen released was incomparably sharp. It was even stronger than high-grade emperors. Hee, do you still want to run after falling into this old man's hands? The palm exerted a bit of force, and Yi Chen's protective Zhen Yuan and sword domain collapsed. He spurted out a mouthful of blood. Yi Chen, don't be rash. If he wanted to kill us, he could have killed us all just now. Don't anger him. Stone Emperor hastily transmitted his voice to Yi Chen. Yi Chen nodded slightly. Just as Stone Emperor had said, with the opponent's methods, they wouldn't be able to kill them even if they had 100 lives. Even peak emperors wouldn't be able to contend against a quasi-sovereign's methods. You're smart. Indeed, I won't kill you. As long as you do me a favor, I can let you go. The old man's voice transmitted over. Stone Emperor's face paled. The opponent could actually hear his soul transmission. It was too frightening. Senior, you're a quasi-sovereign. If even you can't do anything, I'm afraid we'll be even more helpless. Stone Emperor smiled bitterly. The old man shook his head and sneered. There's nothing absolute in this world. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any accidents. This old man can't do it alone. With you guys, there's a bit more hope. Since that's the case, I'll accept it. The Stone Puppet Emperor knew that if they didn't agree, they would only suffer more. The other party might kill one of them out of anger, and the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. At this moment, they had no choice but to lower their heads. Even if the other party wanted them to die, they wouldn't be able to resist. At the same time, the Stone Puppet Emperor blamed himself. Yi Chen and the others had come to the Heavenly River mainly to find the sovereign path, spiritual route for him. If it wasn't for him, even if Yi Chen and the others wanted to come, they wouldn't have come now. At the very least, they would only be able to travel the Heavenly River after a long period of time. With Yi Chen's talent, even if he couldn't defeat a quasi-venerable at that time, he would at least be able to protect himself. I don't know which race this old man is from, but he shouldn't be from the demons, yakshas, or evil spirits. It's also unlikely that he's from the Green Man tribe. He should be from another race. That technique just now contained the profound of the 5 elements, forming a world of its own. However, even I could see some flaws in it. It's probably just superficial. It can't be considered a real supreme martial art. Supreme martial arts contained several kinds of profound that reinforced and restrained each other, and the profound of the 5 elements was one of them. The old man's degree of integration of the 5 elements was not high. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have chosen to struggle because he had no way to do so. Of course, even if it was just a superficial supreme martial art, it was still thousands of times stronger than Yi Chen's Doomsday Meteor Sword. Still sitting cross-legged on the ground, the old man stretched out his right hand and made a grabbing motion. With a pop, a dazzling 5-colored ball of light appeared before him. Very quickly, the old man threw Yi Chen's group of 5 into the 5-colored ball of light. Then, he closed his eyes as if he was healing. The 5-colored ball of light was only the size of a palm, but Yi Chen's group of 5 didn't think so. Yi Chen's soul force spread out and immediately discovered that the diameter of the 5-colored ball of light had reached an astonishing 5 million miles. Although it couldn't be considered a world or a plane and could only be considered a subspace, it was still very terrifying. What should we do now? The Scarlet Wind Emperor frowned. If he had known that there was a quasi-venerable of a foreign race on this island, he wouldn't have come even if he was beaten to death. Yi Chen said, "Since we're already here, let's just take things as they come. I believe we'll be safe for a while." The Stone Statue Emperor said, "If I'm not wrong, this old man should be a quasi-venerable of the spirit race. His name is Old Ancestor Wuling. It is said that he has lived for almost 100,000 years and is reaching the end of his lifespan. The spirit race was a race born from the heavens. Although there weren't many members, each of them was extremely powerful. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that in terms of average battle strength, whether it was the demons or the Yiksha race, they were worlds apart. Of course, in terms of overall strength, the spirit race was far behind the demons or the human race. The spirit race had a total of 5 supremes, which wasn't too many or too few. They lived in a star field called the Spirit Zone, which was very far from the 4 major star fields and the Demon Zone. They were a neutral race. In the near future, the neutral races wouldn't necessarily continue to live in peace. However, for now, any neutral race would be the target of the demons and the human race. Even if they couldn't win them over, they wouldn't offend them, lest they join the enemy's alliance out of anger. Not good. This old man is reaching the end of his lifespan. He must have come to the heavenly river to find some heaven-defying treasure that can increase his lifespan. The environment of such a treasure is extremely dangerous. No wonder he got injured. The Fire Sparrow Emperor's brows creased. The lifespan of a life and death king was 100,000 years. Normally, this was the limit. However, the heavens would always leave a way out. Some heaven-defying treasures could indeed increase one's lifespan. For example, back in Elysium, Dragon King had lived for 1,000 years, creating a miracle. Hearing these words, the stone statue Emperor's expression suddenly changed. "What's wrong?" Snow Air Emperor asked. The stone statue Emperor sucked in a deep breath and said bitterly, "This is indeed bad. Do you know that old ancestor Wuling specializes in a secret art called the sky-seizing puppet secret art? Sky-seizing puppet secret art? Yi Chen looked at the stone statue emperor. The stone statue emperor explained, the sky-seizing puppet secret art is an ancient secret art. It's useless to the user himself, but it can turn others into puppets and give them 50% of the user's battle power. You're saying that he wants to turn us into puppets to open a path for him? Yi Chen's heart shook as he said. Most likely. The stone statue emperor's expression was bitter. Soon after, he raised his head and said to Yi Chen and the others, "It's all because of me that you guys ended up like this. In my next life, I, the stone statue emperor, am willing to do anything for you guys." Although the Scarlet Wind Emperor wasn't in a good mood, he still tried to persuade the stone being emperor, "It's still unknown whether or not we will be refined into puppets. Let's not worry too much. Perhaps the situation will be much better than this." "I hope so." The stone statue emperor nodded. Yi Chen's mood was also very heavy. However, he had experienced countless adversity and would never give up. This time was no exception. Getting rid of all distracting thoughts, Yi Chen tried to find a flaw in the 5-colored space, hoping to find a way out. The premise was that old ancestor Wuling hadn't put away the 5-colored light ball. Suddenly, Yi Chen's face flashed with joy. The space inside the 5-colored light ball wasn't as stable as the outside world. It would occasionally emit clear spatial fluctuations. When his soul force scanned these spatial fluctuations, Yi Chen's space profundity seemed to be showing signs of a breakthrough. If I can comprehend the space profundity to perfection, I might have a chance to escape. With that thought, Yi Chen sat down and spread his soul force to comprehend the space profundity. Chapter 12:31. Time flew by, and no one knew how much time had passed. Inside the 5-colored space, Yi Chen's space ultimacy was gradually increasing, and it had reached the critical point. Space ultimacy's great completion and space ultimacy's completion seemed to be a step away, but without the right opportunity, it was normal for one to not be able to comprehend it even after tens of thousands of years. After all, space ultimacy was not an ordinary ultimacy. It was an existence just below the power ultimacy and time ultimacy. Once it was completely comprehended, there would be a chance to comprehend time ultimacy. Originally, it was impossible for Yi Chen to have a chance to improve space ultimacy to completion in a short period of time. However, the world was strange. Wooling old ancestor catching them was a disaster, but putting them in the five-colored space was a blessing for Yi Chen. As for why it was a blessing, it was mainly because the five-colored space was composed of the five kinds of yuan qi and ultimacy: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. However, because Wooling old ancestors' five elements ultimacy wasn't integrated to a high degree, the spatial fluctuations were very obvious, giving Yi Chen a chance. Misfortune and blessing came hand in hand. Until the end, no one knew what the result would be. Space, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, the five elements reinforce and subdue each other. Yi Chen was completely immersed in comprehension. In the past, he had only comprehended space ultimacy and didn't think about anything else. But now, he found that comprehending space ultimacy wasn't that simple. If he could use the five elements ultimacy and space ultimacy to complement each other, he could comprehend space ultimacy even faster. This was because the five elements ultimacy contained everything, including time. Wisps and wisps. Yi Chen's soul sea became more and more transparent, and a kind of enlightenment came straight to his heart. Creak. In his heart there seemed to be a huge door opening. Yi Chen's eyes suddenly opened, and a strange light spread out, as if he could see through space and time. Is this space ultimacy at completion? Yi Chen felt that he could teleport. Buzz. A faint spatial fluctuation spread out, and Yi Chen instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the edge of the multicolored space. The spatial barrier there was multicolored like a thick layer of multicolored crystals. This five-colored space no longer has any secrets in my eyes. However, this spatial barrier is extremely profound. It contains many layers of space. Once I enter it, I'm afraid that I will need to spend a great amount of effort to escape. At that time, Ancestor Wooling will definitely stop me. Other than that, I will not be able to bring anyone away. Yi Chen frowned slightly. The five-colored space was connected to Patriarch Wooling's mind. Yi Chen didn't think that Patriarch Wooling wouldn't know that he had broken through the spatial barrier. Rather than taking the risk, he might as well wait for the right opportunity. Strolling leisurely, Yi Chen teleported to the center of the colorful space. At this time, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the other three were cultivating in seclusion. Over the past few years, everyone had gathered quite a lot of good things, and some of them could be used now. The space ultimacy has reached completion. Now it's time to improve my spirit body. Taking out the extreme yang wood and the profound yin grass, Yi Chen rubbed his hands together. The two items immediately turned into two streams of air that were absorbed into Yi Chen's body. These two streams of air were extremely pure yin-yang energy. Ordinary yin-yang energy naturally couldn't improve Yi Chen's spirit body, but the yin-yang energy contained in these two was incomparably strong and didn't have too many impurities. They were actually nourished by the yin-yang energy. The yin-yang energy formed a yin-yang diagram in Yi Chen's body, harmonizing the yin-yang and five elements in his body. At this time, using treasures to improve his spirit body would be twice the result with half the effort and wouldn't be a waste. Immediately after, Yi Chen took out a large number of treasures. There was the purple electric spirit liquid, form refining flower, and fairy lady grass. Of course, these were all supplementary materials and wouldn't have any effect on a rank 7 spirit body. The last item Yi Chen took out was a human-shaped fruit. This human-shaped fruit was called the human spirit fruit. It had the effect of nourishing a rank 7 spirit body. If there were 2 human spirit fruits, it could directly improve the spirit body from rank 7 initial stage to rank 7 middle stage. However, now that Yi Chen had the extreme yang wood and the profound yin grass, he shouldn't need 2 to succeed. Everything was ready, and he was only missing the right thing. Taking a deep breath, Yi Chen jumped into a jade bucket that was half the height of a person. The liquid inside was the purple electric spirit liquid, form refining flower and fairy lady grass. Soaking inside, Yi Chen swallowed the human spirit fruit, closed his eyes, and put his palms together. In fact, Yi Chen had underestimated the effects of the extreme yang wood and profound yin grass. After consuming a small portion of the medicinal energy, Yi Chen's spirit body successfully broke through to the rank 7 midstage. The yin-yang diagram formed from the extreme yang wood and profound yin grass was like a transfer station that could increase the medicinal energy by 4 to 8 times. Originally, Yi Chen thought that 2 times would be the limit. Compared to the rank 7 midstage spirit body, the rank 7 midstage spirit body was several times stronger, and the inextinguishable energy within it was also several times stronger. Why don't I go all out and break through to the rank 7 midstage? Compared to the rank 7 midstage, the rank 7 late stage was several times stronger. Putting his thoughts into action, Yi Chen focused all his attention on the yin-yang diagram in his body. 3 days later, Yi Chen opened his eyes and a bright light burst out. Just a little bit more and I can reach the rank 7 late stage. I still have the yin-yang qi, but I don't have the materials to break through. At this time, the liquid inside the jade bucket had turned transparent, no different from water. All the energy inside was absorbed by Yi Chen. Yi Chen, I still have some here. Suddenly, 10 purplish-red crystals were thrown into the jade bucket. They were the Stone Emperor. He had stopped his seclusion a few days ago, and when he discovered that Yi Chen was breaking through, he stood by the side to protect him. These purplish-red crystals were called purple spirit crystals, and they were extremely rare. The Stone Emperor was originally preparing them for his own breakthrough, but he gave them to Yi Chen without any hesitation. After all, he still didn't know whether he would live or die this time, and he felt extremely guilty. Many thanks. Yi Chen nodded his head slightly. The moment the purple spirit crystals fell into the water, a drastic change occurred. Waves of purplish-red energy spread out, changing the color of the water completely, and a bubbling sound could be heard. Not daring to delay, Yi Chen absorbed the energy of the purple spirit crystals with all his might. With the addition of new energy, Yi Chen's stagnant spirit body continued to improve. Crack! The jade bucket shattered, and water splashed everywhere. With a blue flash, a set of blue clothes appeared on Yi Chen's body. A late-stage 7th rank spirit body was formed. A late-stage 7th rank spirit body, and the inextinguishable energy had begun to take shape. If the inextinguishable energy in the past was described as a very limited pool of water, then now it had transformed into a meandering stream. Not only did it increase in quantity, but its recovery speed was much faster than before as well. Congratulations! The Stone Emperor smiled. It's all thanks to your purple spirit crystals, Yi Chen said. The Stone Emperor shook his head. What I owe you isn't even enough for 100 purple spirit crystals. This time, Yi Chen interrupted him. You and I are friends. How can the friendship between friends be valued by external objects? Don't say such things again. All right. The Stone Emperor nodded vigorously. After an unknown amount of time, Yi Chen and the others even thought that Ancestor Wuling had completely forgotten about them. On this day, Ancestor Wuling woke up from his healing. Now that I've fully recovered, I will definitely obtain the abyssal fruit. Swish! With a flash of white light, Ancestor Wuling instantly left the island. Chapter 1232. Above the heavenly river, there was a vast expanse of whiteness. A multicolored ship quickly sailed over. A person was sitting cross-legged in the cabin of the ship. It was old Ancestor Wuling. This multicolored ship was his most precious treasure. It was an advanced Emperor-level warship. When a warship reached the Emperor level, its value would increase tenfold or even 100-fold with every minor grade. Even with his quasi-venerate strength and close to 100,000 years of accumulation, he only had one advanced Emperor-level warship. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't have the financial resources to buy it, but that he had nowhere to buy it. Otherwise, he was confident that he could even buy a top Emperor-level warship. He opened his right hand, and a spot of light slowly lit up in his palm. Soon, a multicolored ball of light flew out and floated in front of old ancestor Wuling. I didn't have the time to control them while I was treating my injuries. Now it's time to use the heaven-seizing puppet secret technique. The heaven-seizing puppet secret technique was a mysterious ancient secret technique. It was a priceless treasure that old ancestor Wuling had obtained from an ancient secret realm. The world only knew that the heaven-seizing puppet secret technique could refine a puppet with 50% of the original strength, but they didn't know that 50% was not the limit. Generally speaking, ordinary martial emperors could only be refined into puppets with 50% of the original strength. As for titled monarchs, they could only be refined into yellow-grade puppets with 10 or 20% of the original strength. However, old ancestor Wuling had seen records in the secret technique that some rare peerless geniuses could be refined into earth-grade puppets with 70% of the original strength. The strength of the puppet was related to the puppet's own cultivation, but it wasn't an absolute relationship. Geniuses who could challenge those of a higher cultivation level had a mysterious substance in their bodies. It was this substance that determined the strength of the puppet. The reason why old ancestor Wuling had captured Yi Chen's group of 5 was that there was not only a low-level martial emperor among Yi Chen's group of 5, but there was also a peerless genius among them. This peerless genius was naturally Yi Chen. With the earth-grade puppet, ordinary quasi-venerates are no match for me. Even if I encounter a powerful quasi-venerate, I can easily escape. Old ancestor Wuling was currently in a very good mood. The gloominess from losing a quasi-earth-grade puppet decades ago had been swept away. Thinking of that quasi-earth rank puppet, Wuling Patriarch could not help but think to himself, Emperor in green clothes, this old man will take revenge sooner or later. The materials for quasi-earth step puppets were also rare geniuses that could only be chanced upon. After all, there were some truly powerful geniuses that Wuling old ancestor didn't dare to touch, nor could he touch. If he provoked the supremes behind them, even if he had 100 lives, it wouldn't be enough. Hence, to Wuling old ancestor, quasi-earth step puppets were extremely precious, and the more the better. As for earth step puppets, he didn't even think about them. He didn't believe that a peerless genius with no background would appear in the starry skies of the universe. Yi Chen's appearance made him wild with joy. According to the information, there was absolutely no supreme being behind Yi Chen. This was practically a pie that fell from the sky. Let's start with the lad with the worst aptitude. Old ancestor Wuling grabbed the Stone Man Emperor first. In his eyes, the Stone Man Emperor had the worst talent. The other 4 were younger and had great potential, especially Yi Chen. The moment the Stone Man Emperor was grabbed, he fell into a coma and was at old ancestor Wuling's mercy. Within the 5-colored space, Yi Chen and the other 3 had ugly expressions. A 5-colored palm had reached in and grabbed the Stone Man Emperor. They didn't even have time to react. Bastard! The Scarlet Wind Emperor was anxious. Let me see if I can break through the spatial barrier and escape. Yi Chen didn't plan to wait for death. Old ancestor Wuling capturing the Stone Man Emperor was definitely not a good thing. Then what about old Shi? The Fire Sparrow Emperor asked hesitantly. Yi Chen was silent. Old ancestor Wuling was a quasi-venerable, and they couldn't save the Stone Man Emperor. It was unknown whether he could escape or not. The Scarlet Wind Emperor's eyes were red as he said, "If we stay, everyone will die. If we can escape, there will be a chance to take revenge for old Shi in the future." His relationship with the Stone Man Emperor was indescribable, but things had to be prioritized. If he could save the Stone Man Emperor, the Scarlet Wind Emperor wouldn't hesitate. But if he stayed, he would still die. Lang Feng is right. The Snow Air Emperor was in a bad mood. She had never thought that such a thing would happen. "Let's go. Taking a deep breath, Yi Chen flew toward the edge of the five-colored space. The Scarlet Wind Emperor and the other two followed behind. Arriving in front of the spatial barrier, Yi Chen opened the soul eye between his eyebrows. After his space profound reached perfection, Yi Chen's gaze had the spatial attribute. He could see through the void within his sensing range. With the help of the soul eye, this range would be expanded by 100 times. Within his line of sight, there was a three-dimensional square frame with countless dotted lines. These dotted lines were the trajectories of the spatial fluctuations. The trajectories of the spatial fluctuations in the outside world were more subtle, but the trajectories of the spatial fluctuations in the five-colored space were much more obvious. Of course, it would be very difficult to bring the three of them away, so he could only try. Open! After a long time, Yi Chen suddenly pulled out the flying heaven sword and slashed at the void. Whoosh! A crack appeared in the void. Go in. Yi Chen's figure entered. This opening was where the trajectories of the spatial fluctuations overlap. If one attacked from here, it would be easier to tear space apart and enter a mezzanine in the spatial barrier. As for the spatial barrier, it was like a 1,000-layer cake. There were many interlayers. One space mezzanine, 2, 3 in a short period of time. Yi Chen's group of 4 passed through 323 interlayers. If Wuling Forefather was healing, Yi Chen's actions would definitely be known by Wuling Forefather. This was because the five-colored space was hidden in Wuling Forefather's palm. Once there was a ripple, his mind would immediately sense it. Now, because Wuling Forefather was refining the stone puppet emperor into a yellow rank puppet, his mind's perception was much weaker. Adding on the fact that the five-colored space was placed outside, his mind's perception was weakened again. 455. 468. Vaguely, Yi Chen could already see the outside world. Finally, Yi Chen's group of 4 arrived at the outermost interlayer. Turning around, Yi Chen said solemnly, "Next, we need to rush out in an instant and fly straight out of the battleship. At that time, I can only take care of myself. I hope you can understand." Scarlet Wind Emperor patted Yi Chen's shoulder. "It's good that one of us can escape. If you can escape, take revenge for me in the future. In turn, I will take revenge for you." Lang Feng is right. You have already done what you should do. Snow Air Emperor nodded sadly. Everyone, get ready. Yi Chen had no distracting thoughts. Life or death depended on this. After 3 breaths, Yi Chen slashed open a crack with his sword. His entire body flew out like a beam of light. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The place where the 4 appeared was the cabin of the 5-colored battleship. The cabin door wasn't closed, which saved a lot of time. Yi Chen arrived at the door in an instant. Along the way, he turned around and saw Stone Emperor. Stone Emperor's entire body was covered in 5-colored light, and his eyes were dull. On Wuling Old Ancestor's body, rays of 5-colored light merged into Stone Emperor's body. Suddenly, Wuling Old Ancestor opened his eyes. "Good lad, you can actually completely comprehend the space profound and escape from my 5-elemental space." Wuling Old Ancestor wasn't angry. Instead, he was happy. With a wave of his hand, the cabin door immediately closed. However, Yi Chen was faster than he imagined. At the critical moment, he flew out through the gap of the cabin door. As for Scarlet Wind Emperor and the other 2, they were a step slower and were trapped inside. Chapter 1233. Yi Chen, you must escape. Scarlet Wind Emperor roared. If you want to escape, you'll have to ask if I'm willing." Wuling Old Ancestor's expression darkened. He gave up on refining the Stone Emperor and spread his consciousness across the entire multicolored ship. Under normal circumstances, the puppet warship could only be exited and not entered. However, if the owner of the puppet warship was willing, it was completely possible for the puppet warship to be in an alert state. Arriving on the deck, Yi Chen raised his speed to the limit and flew out of the protective cover. As long as he left the protective cover, with his teleportation ability and the special environment of the celestial river, it would be very difficult for Wooling Old Ancestor to catch him. One day, he would find Wooling Old Ancestor for revenge, not only for himself but also for the 4 Scarlet Wind Emperor. Seeing that Yi Chen was about to break through the protective cover, the color of the protective cover suddenly changed from 5 colors to a chaotic color. With a bang, Yi Chen was bounced back. Not good! Yi Chen's expression changed greatly. Without thinking, the flying heaven sword in his hand slashed at the protective cover. Gotcha! The multicolored ship was a high-level puppet warship that could withstand many attacks from high-level Monarch Realm expert. Yi Chen's attack was not inferior to that of ordinary high-level Monarch Realm expert. With one slash, a crack immediately appeared on the protective cover. Although the crack quickly healed, it at least gave Yi Chen hope. Circulating his sword energy to the limit, Yi Chen used his strongest sword art, Doomsday Meteor Sword. Suddenly, a lava sword light that could destroy the world burst out and slashed at the protective cover. The protective cover twisted crazily, and with a boom, a wide sword mark appeared. The crack was healing at an astonishing speed. Yi Chen could not pass through it in time. One more time. Yi Chen took a deep breath and was about to continue his attack. Can you escape? Unknowingly, Wooling Ancestor was standing on the deck, looking at Yi Chen coldly. Yi Chen's strength was beyond his imagination, but as long as he was within his attack range, the opponent could not escape. With a grab, Yi Chen once again landed in Patriarch Wooling's hand. This is probably fate. For the first time, Yi Chen felt a trace of despair. Old Ancestor Wooling was too strong, thousands of times stronger than him. There was no way he could contend against him. Although he had experienced countless adversities in the past, and escaping from desperate situations was like eating and drinking to him, it was different this time. When the difference was large to a certain extent, any effort would be useless. The stronger you are, the happier I'll be. Be a good boy and be my puppet. You'll be much stronger than you. You'll be an Earth-grade puppet at the very least, and will have 70% of my power. Patriarch Wooling turned around and walked into the cabin. The moment they saw Yi Chen, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others fell into despair. If even Yi Chen couldn't escape, who else would avenge them? Yi Chen. It was unknown what method Patriarch Wooling used on the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others. The 3 could speak, but they couldn't move. At this moment, the Scarlet Wind Emperor looked at Yi Chen bitterly. Yi Chen's eyes had regained their calmness, and an unyielding light flickered in the depths of his eyes. Don't be delusional. My heaven-seizing puppet secret art has never failed. Once you become my puppets, you'll be my puppets for the rest of your lives. There will be no accidents. Patriarch Wooling seemed to know what Yi Chen was thinking and said indifferently. After releasing Yi Chen, Patriarch Wooling pointed at his glabella. In the next moment, Yi Chen's chi, blood, and sword energy all stopped circulating. His entire body seemed to have entered a state of rest, and only his thoughts were still operating. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Patriarch Wooling continued to refine the Stone Emperor. Because he couldn't even use his soul force, Yi Chen could only use his eyes to see. He saw runes appear on the Stone Emperor's body. These runes seemed to have a life of their own as they drilled in and out of the Stone Emperor's body. When a huge human rune appeared and imprinted on the Stone Emperor's body, the Stone Emperor's aura instantly changed and became very unfamiliar. Purely using soul force to sense it, Yi Chen couldn't guess that this was the Stone Emperor. At this moment, the Stone Emperor's eyes were dull and lifeless, but his aura was unimaginably strong. Compared to himself, it was hundreds or thousands of times stronger. It was probably comparable to a peak emperor. His aptitude really isn't good. He only has 10% of my strength. Adding on the puppet's lack of intelligence, it would be good if he could use half of his strength in battle. Patriarch Wooling wasn't satisfied with the yellow stare puppet in front of him. To him, it was dispensable and just cannon fodder. It's your turn. Patriarch Wuling made a grabbing motion, and the Snow Air Emperor floated over. The Snow Air Emperor's aptitude was second from the bottom, only a bit better than the Stone Emperor. Soft skin and tender flesh. If I were 10,000 years younger, I might refine you into a pleasure puppet. Nearing the end of his lifespan, Patriarch Wuling didn't have the mood to enjoy himself. An hour later, the Snow Air Emperor had also become a yellow stare puppet. Then, it was the Scarlet Wind Emperor's turn. The Scarlet Wind Emperor's aptitude was third from the top, and also third from the bottom. However, he was an 8th layer life and death realm heavenly emperor, and could easily be refined into a profound grade puppet. This time it took a lot longer. 12 hours passed before the refinement was completed. The moment the refinement was completed, the Scarlet Wind Emperor's aura expanded endlessly, and only slowed down when it approached the quasi-sovereign level. Patriarch Wuling roughly estimated that the Scarlet Wind Emperor's strength was a bit more than 50% of his own. Of course, whether or not the Scarlet Wind Emperor could bring out 50% of his strength was still unknown. It would depend on whether the Scarlet Wind Emperor's puppet consciousness was high enough, and the puppet's consciousness depended on the user's battle consciousness. This little girl is from the Phoenix clan. Her physique is very powerful and she is a good material. Patriarch Wuling glanced at the Phoenix Emperor. The Phoenix Emperor said in a panic, "If you refine me into a puppet, my Phoenix clan's elders will not let you go." You're just a junior. Do you think the Phoenix clan will incur enmity with my Spirit clan for you? The reason why Patriarch Wuling was so unscrupulous was because of the Spirit clan's status. The Spirit clan was neither big nor small, and was also a medium-sized clan. There were 5 supremes in the clan. Regardless of whether it was the Demons Alliance or the Human Race Alliance, if they could obtain the Spirit clan's support, their strength would immediately increase by a lot, and they would be able to suppress the other party in a head-on battle. If it was during peaceful times, Patriarch Wuling would really hesitate and think about whether it was worth it. In the end, the Phoenix Emperor could not escape this calamity and was refined into a profound-grade puppet. Compared to the Scarlet Wind Emperor, the Phoenix Emperor's aura was slightly inferior. However, the Phoenix Emperor's puppet consciousness was slightly higher than the Scarlet Wind Emperor's. This was due to their aptitude. According to Patriarch Wuling's experience, if they were to fight, the Phoenix Emperor should be slightly better. Even with Patriarch Wuling's quasi-sovereign cultivation, it was a bit difficult to refine 4 puppets at once. However, he could not wait any longer. In his eyes, Yi Chen was simply a priceless treasure. He really wanted to see how strong Yi Chen would be after being refined into a puppet. "It's your turn, hee." Patriarch Wuling waved his hand, and Yi Chen involuntarily floated over. Chapter 1234. Taking a deep breath, old ancestor Wuling's eyes shone brightly. Immediately after, a dazzling 5-colored light burst out from his body. This 5-colored light first expanded before suddenly shrinking and entering old ancestor Wuling's body. When it came out again, it had turned into many 5-colored threads. If one were to look at these 5-colored threads, they would discover that they were made up of groups of tiny runes. They were like gene chains, and these 5-colored threads also contained old ancestor Wuling's will. Without a sound, countless 5-colored threads drilled into Yi Chen's body and began to take over Yi Chen's body and soul. 2 hours passed, and Yi Chen's eyes started to become dull. He would only wake up once every 10 breaths. "Good lad, your soul consciousness is actually so strong." Old ancestor Wuling was both shocked and delighted. Previously, when he was refining the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the Fire Sparrow Emperor, it only took him 5 minutes to refine their consciousnesses into puppet consciousnesses. Now that 2 hours had passed, Yi Chen's soul consciousness still hadn't turned into puppet consciousnesses and was still resisting. "I want to see how long you can resist for. I hope you won't disappoint me." Gradually, 1.5 hours passed. 4 hours passed. Yi Chen's eyes would only wake up once every 10 minutes. Moreover, they seemed to be awake, but they weren't. They were in a chaotic state. At this moment, if someone used their soul consciousness to observe the interior of Yi Chen's body, they would discover that all the tissues in Yi Chen's body were entrenched with 5 colored threads. It was as if Yi Chen's body was originally scattered, but now it was strung together by the 5 colored threads. Of course, the 5 colored threads had already touched the most basic flesh particles. 6 hours passed, and Yi Chen's eyes were no longer in a dull state. Instead, they turned into 5-colored gems that shone brightly like 2 5-colored gems. It really is an Earth-rank puppet. Old Ancestor Wuling laughed loudly. The symbol of an Earth-rank puppet was that its eyes would emit 5-colored light. The quasi-Earth-rank puppet that was killed by Green-Robed Emperor had a trace of this characteristic. He has become an Earth-rank puppet before he has finished refining. This lad is terrifying. I've gotten lucky. Patriarch Wuling suppressed his joy and continued refining. Wuling Forefather no longer poured the 5-colored strands into Yi Chen's body. He began to condense 5-colored runes and imbue them into Yi Chen's body. He imbued a total of 588 runes into the Stone Man Emperor's body, 622 runes into the Snow Air Emperor's body. The Scarlet Wind Emperor and the Fire Sparrow Emperor's body were about the same. One had 1,444 runes, while the other had 1,500 runes. As for Yi Chen, he had already imbued 3,888 runes. Not enough. This old man wants to refine the strongest Earth-grade puppet. I need at least 4,200 runes. 4,000. 4,100. 4,200. The refinement was not over yet. 4,300. 4,500. In the end, 3 days and 3 nights passed. Patriarch Wuling had imbued a total of 4,800 runes. When the last human-shaped rune was imprinted on Yi Chen's body, Yi Chen's aura expanded at the speed of a planet exploding. The aura of an ordinary peak-level emperor, a mid-level peak-level emperor, a top-level peak-level emperor, and a quasi-supreme. Yi Chen's aura only stabilized when the quasi-supreme aura appeared. 70%, no, it's 79% battle prowess. It's infinitely close to 80%. Looking at Yi Chen, Patriarch Wuling felt as if he was looking at a priceless treasure. A puppet with 80% of the original body's strength was equivalent to a super-powerful clone. In the past, he could completely suppress those who were slightly stronger than him. Heaven is helping this old man. Standing up, Patriarch Wuling was in high spirit. His dying body exuded a disdainful aura. From today onwards, you will be called D.E. Patriarch Wuling gave the name D.E. to Yi Chen. Yes. Yi Chen gave off a very strange feeling. He didn't have the slightest sluggishness and was very obedient. If one observed carefully, one could vaguely distinguish him from a normal life form. After all, there were still some differences between a puppet and a life form, even if this puppet was very perfect. Go and kill him. Suddenly, Patriarch Wuling pointed at the Scarlet Wind Emperor and ordered. Yes. Yi Chen looked at the Scarlet Wind Emperor and pulled out the Flying Heaven Sword. Patriarch Wuling had a playful expression and a hint of scrutiny. He was very confident in other puppets, but he was still a little worried about Yi Chen. Yi Chen's soul consciousness was too tenacious, and he couldn't guarantee that Yi Chen's soul consciousness had completely transformed into a puppet's consciousness. Of course, he wasn't in a hurry. As long as he put in some effort, any hidden dangers would be eliminated sooner or later. Holding the Flying Heaven Sword with both hands, Yi Chen slashed at the Scarlet Wind Emperor with all his strength. Clang! This strike didn't kill the Scarlet Wind Emperor. Unknowingly, a 5-colored light appeared on the surface of the Scarlet Wind Emperor's body. This 5-colored light didn't come from the Scarlet Wind Emperor. With the Scarlet Wind Emperor's strength, he definitely wouldn't be able to block this strike. The source of the 5-colored light came from Patriarch Wuling. Of course, He didn't want Yi Chen to really kill the Scarlet Wind Emperor. He was just probing. All right. Patriarch Wuling waved his hand. The flying heaven sword was sheathed. Yi Chen took 3 steps back and stood to the side. It's really perfect. If I wasn't at the end of my life, I could use you as my cauldron and possess you. Patriarch Wuling was very satisfied with Yi Chen's performance. There wouldn't be any problems for the time being. I'm tired. Guard the door. With that said, Patriarch Wuling waved his hand and the door to the room next door opened. He slowly walked in. Yi Chen took a few steps forward and stood guard outside the door. A moment passed. Yi Chen stood there motionless. His eyes didn't change and he couldn't sense anything strange. Even his mind didn't fluctuate. He was like a statue with a life aura. After observing with his soul power for a while, Patriarch Wuling retracted his attention. He had refined 5 puppets in a row, especially the last supreme grade earth grade puppet. It had exhausted his mind and spirit energy. He hadn't felt this way in tens of thousands of years. He couldn't help but sigh. With the end of his life approaching, his energy was weakening. Closing his eyes, Patriarch Wuling entered an ethereal state. Yi Chen did not know how much time had passed. Perhaps it had been 3 days or perhaps 5. Suddenly, his eyes, which had not blinked at all, blinked once, and a trace of intelligence appeared. However, this intelligence was mixed with confusion, as if he was deep in thought. This state didn't last long. After 100 breaths, the intelligence disappeared, and he returned to his original state. As for the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the other 3, they were like wax figures as they stood there in a daze. On this day, the 5-colored ship arrived at the periphery of an archipelago. If Yi Chen and company were in a sober state, they would definitely discover that this archipelago was the archipelago that they had passed through previously. On the volcanic island, the smell of sulfur filled the air. If they knew that they would experience such a calamity after leaving the volcanic island, they would probably choose to live in the volcano for several years to guard against ghostly attacks rather than become a puppet. Chapter 12:35. Have we arrived? Patriarch Wuling opened his eyes, and 2 beams of 5-colored light shot out, disappearing along the way. This time, I have to acquire the abyssal fruit. A single abyssal fruit could increase one's lifespan by 5,000 years. Ancestor Wuling was confident that he could become a sovereign within 5,000 years. At that time, he would have a chance to change his fate. The door to the room opened and Patriarch Wuling waved his hand. Yi Chen and the other 4 turned into 5 beams of light and entered the 5-colored space in Patriarch Wuling's palm. Putting away the multicolored ship, Wuling Patriarch looked at the volcanic island. His figure flashed, and he instantly arrived at the mouth of the volcano. Frowning slightly, old Ancestor Wuling hesitated. Every time he entered, he would hesitate for a while. This was not a good place. Even with his strength as a quasi-venerable, he had to be on tenterhooks. If not for the fact that his lifespan was almost up, he would not enter even if he was beaten to death. Forget it. This is the last time. If I don't succeed this time, I can only choose other methods to increase my lifespan. The hesitation on old Ancestor Wuling's face disappeared, and an astonishing light burst forth from his eyes. With a whoosh, his body turned into a 5-colored light and flew down the volcano. After a while, Patriarch Wuling arrived at the mouth of the volcano. To old Ancestor Wuling, the cold air created by the 9 nether cold ice was just the cold air of winter. Even if he didn't circulate his spiritual source, it wouldn't be a big problem. What he was afraid of was the nether ghost guarding the entrance. In hell, not to mention ordinary ghosts, there were powerful ghosts such as the Yellow Springs ghosts, the nether ghosts, the impermanence ghosts, and the monarch-like ghost kings. Ordinary people didn't know about these things. Even quasi-venerables didn't know much about them. Only Supremes knew some information about them. As for Wuling Old Ancestor, he had once obtained a tattered ghost book, so he more or less knew about the levels of ghosts. The strength of ghosts couldn't be judged by the strength of the universe because they didn't have a physical body. Unless it was a supreme martial art, normal attacks would be ineffective against them. This was also why ghosts were so difficult to deal with. Their martial arts were almost useless. Stepping on the 9 nether-frozen ice, Ancestor Wooling walked toward the black lava step by step. Glug glug glug, the black magma made a bubbling sound, but what came out was bone-chilling cold. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed towards Ancestor Wooling. "We have fought so many times. Why don't you know your place?" Old Ancestor Wooling waved his hand and a 5-colored light spread out, turning into a barrier that blocked the black shadow. Bang! The black shadow bounced back, but a layer of ice formed on the multicolored barrier, showing signs of collapsing. The black shadow floated above the black magma, and the blackness on its body gradually faded, revealing a face without any signs of life. This face was very strange, as if it was wearing a mask. Its eyes had no pupils, only sclera. No matter from which angle you looked at it, you would feel that it was looking at you. That kind of cold and vicious gaze was like maggots in the tarsal bone, impossible to get rid of. Old Ancestor Wooling frowned. With his lethality against ghosts, it was really difficult for him to eliminate the other party. Moreover, it was a little irrational to fight to the death with a nether ghost. Form the formation. Wooling Old Ancestor opened his right hand, and Yi Chen, Scarlet Wind Emperor, and Fire Sparrow Emperor rushed out. The 3 of them formed a square formation with Wooling Old Ancestor, surrounding the nether ghost in the center. In the next moment, a 5-colored light surged out from the 4 of them, forming a 5-colored cube that sealed the nether ghost. "Come back!" After putting away Yi Chen and the other 2, Wooling Old Ancestor dove into the black magma. This 4 symbols barrier couldn't seal the nether ghost for long, so he had to enter hell in a short time. In the black magma, it was bone-chilling. Wooling Old Ancestor circulated his spiritual source and formed a spiritual source barrier outside his body. Even so, traces of cold aura still passed through the barrier and reached Wooling Old Ancestor's body. Gradually, 2 specks of dim light appeared below. That was the entrance to hell. When the dim lights were right in front of him, he discovered that it was an illusory door. The door had 2 plates, and there were 2 torches on it. The torches were burning with ghostly flames. Creak! Wooling Old Ancestor took a deep breath and pushed the door open. His figure flashed, and he flew in. Above the black magma, the 5-colored cube collapsed. The nether ghost looked around, and when he saw that there was no one, he slowly sank into the black magma. In hell, there was no sunlight and there were no bright plants. Although the entire environment wasn't pitch black, it was very dark, like dusk on a human planet. Dead silence, bleak and gloomy. This was hell, and there were no signs of life. If a normal person stayed here for a period of time, they would go crazy if they weren't killed by the ghost. This is the 5th time I've come to hell. I hope my luck is better. Wooling Old Ancestor was already used to the environment here, so he didn't make a fuss. After all, in most people's imagination, hell should be like this. After looking around, Wooling Old Ancestor suddenly teleported toward the east. After about 3 days, Wooling Old Ancestor saw a terrifying mountain that was 500,000 feet tall. This mountain was filled with cold aura, and it wasn't as open as the mountains in the human world. Of course, it was grand. In hell, mountain peaks were also called Een Mountains, and they were treasured lands that powerful ghosts fought over. Those who successfully seized a Een Mountain would have the title of Mountain Ghost, which was equivalent to the lord of a city. Many ghosts who weren't strong enough would fight to join them and become one of their subordinate. According to the size of the Een Mountain, one could tell how powerful the power of the Een Mountain's master, Mountain Ghost, was. The smallest Een Mountain was 300,000 feet tall, followed by 300,000 feet, 500,000 feet, and 10 million feet. The Een Mountain, which was 100,000 feet tall, had the smallest power. 300,000 feet tall was already a small scale. The 500,000 feet tall Een Mountain was considered a powerful power. After all, there were differences in strength among mountain ghosts. The weakest was a Grade 1 mountain ghost, and the 500,000 feet tall Een Mountain ghost was a Grade 3 mountain ghost. As for the nether ghosts that guarded the entrance to hell, they weren't even mountain ghosts. Otherwise, they wouldn't be used to guard the entrance to hell. If this 500,000 feet tall Een Mountain had a Grade 3 mountain ghost, Wooling Old Ancestor definitely wouldn't have come. He was confident that he could handle a Grade 1 mountain ghost, but he wouldn't be able to handle a Grade 2 mountain ghost. A Grade 3 mountain ghost could completely devour him, unless a few powerful quasi-venerables like the azure-robed Emperor came. This Een Mountain was discovered by Wooling Old Ancestor the second time he came. What surprised him even more was that this Een Mountain was actually sealed. From the foot of the mountain to the peak, there were a total of 49 seals. Each seal corresponded to a layer. In other words, there were a total of 49 layers. When Wooling Old Ancestor came the second time, he didn't rashly charge in. On his third time, he was nearing the end of his lifespan, so he took the risk and fought his way to the 34th layer. On his fourth time, he fought his way to the 38th layer. This was his fifth time. According to the tattered ghost book, every Een Mountain had a chance of growing a nether tree. The nether tree would bear a fruit every 10,000 years. This fruit was the nether fruit that could increase one's lifespan. Wooling Old Ancestor didn't see the nether tree on the 38th layer. He pinned his hopes on the 40th layer and above. Chapter 1236. At the foot of the mountain, there was a greeting platform that emanated a gloomy aura. It was over 10,000 feet in both width and length, and in the middle of it was an unknown skull the size of a small hill. The eyes of the skull were burning with a ghostly fire, as if it had intelligence. The Een Mountain and the guest stand were connected by a stone path that was tens of thousands of feet long. Red lanterns made of paper were hung on both sides of the stone path. When the chilly wind blew, the red lanterns swayed and made a rattling noise. At that moment there were already 4 figures standing on the platform. The aura they exuded was no weaker than Old Ancestor Wooling's. However, just like Old Ancestor Wooling, these people were very old. Although their auras were strong, they seemed to be dying. These old guys are here too. Old Ancestor Wooling's eyes flickered when he saw the 4 figures on the platform. Old Monster Wooling, since you're here, why don't you come over and have a chat? A skinny old man said to Old Ancestor Wooling with a hoarse smile. Old Een Young Monster, it's fate that I can see you every time. Old Ancestor Wooling laughed and instantly appeared on the platform. The old Een Young Monster he mentioned was a quasi-venerate of the evil spirit race called Een Young South. He was older than Old Ancestor Wooling and had lived for nearly 110,000 years. The reason he could surpass the limit was that he had obtained 2 netherworld fruits, which increased his lifespan by 10,000 years. Een Yang So was proficient in the profound of Yin and Yang. His ultimate technique, Een Yang Extreme Change, was one of the most difficult ultimate techniques Old Ancestor Wooling had ever seen. Hee, I'm lucky every time I see you. I hope it'll be the same this time. Een Yang So's eyes were dark, and the evil aura around him was not inferior to the ghostly aura in hell. Ahem, Old Monster Wooling, since we can meet here, why don't we work together to pass the trial? The old woman standing not far away coughed with her walking stick. Old Ancestor Wooling looked at her and said hesitantly, "This should be Night Ghost Granny." "That's right, it's me. What do you think?" Night Ghost Granny was a quasi-venerate of the Yiksha race. She had lived for more than 14,000 years. Working together to pass the trial seems to be a good idea. As for these 2, I don't know them. Please introduce them to me. There were too many old monsters of the various races. Old Ancestor Wooling did not know all of them, especially some of them who had been in seclusion for a long time. Een Yang So sneered, "This is Ancestor Herculean of the Barbarian tribe, and this is Ancestor Golden Light of the Demon tribe. Patriarch Hercules was tall and sturdy. He was more than 2 meters tall, but his back was a bit stooped. His eyes flickered with an aura of death, a sign that he was close to the end of his lifespan. Patriarch Golden Light was the complete opposite of Patriarch Herculean. He was extremely short, clearly a midget. His murky eyes occasionally flashed with a golden light that was extremely sharp. In the outside world, they were all mortal enemies. However, in here, everyone was here to survive. There was no point in fighting to the death. This was also the main reason why the 4 of them did not kill each other before this. I have long heard of Patriarch Wooling's name. Now that I see you, you are nothing special. Patriarch Herculean seemed to have some animosity towards Patriarch Wooling. His tone was unfriendly. Old Ancestor Wooling wasn't a kind person. He put on a fake smile and said, "The barbarian race seems to be a bunch of arrogant people. However, the geniuses of the barbarian race are not bad. They were refined into puppets and their bodies are very strong." Humph! Patriarch Herculean snorted coldly. A ferocious glint appeared in his eyes as he said, "Let me ask you. Did you kidnap my old friend, Heavenly Wolf's 7th disciple? If you know what's good for you, you'd best return him to his original form. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." The Heavenly Wolf you speak of should be old monster Heavenly Wolf, right? He is also quite a character. However, everything needs evidence. Did you personally see me kidnap his 7th disciple? Although Patriarch Wooling wasn't afraid of Patriarch Herculean or old monster Heavenly Wolf, he wasn't willing to form a death grudge with them. Thus, he absolutely wouldn't admit to it. Of course, he had indeed refined old monster Heavenly Wolf's 7th disciple into a puppet. Back then, that Junior had also said that he was old monster Heavenly Wolf's disciple. Old monster Wooling, don't try to deny it. I know you did it. Patriarch Herculean was 70% certain that old monster Heavenly Wolf had done it. As long as old monster Heavenly Wolf admitted to it, this matter would be easy to handle. Old monster Herculean, do you think I'm afraid of you? I'll say it again. This matter has nothing to do with me. If you want to fight, then let's fight. Even if I have to get injured, I'll kill you. Alright, the 2 of you. This is the infernal realm. You are not allowed to mention anything that happened in the outside world. We can talk about our grudges after we leave the infernal realm. I'll say the ugly words first. If anyone dares to cause trouble again, please mind your manners. Old Inyang didn't want to bother with Patriarch Wooling and Patriarch Herculean. However, these 2 were quasi-exalt. If they caused trouble, they might alarm some of the nearby powerful mountain ghosts. Old Inyang is right. I came to the infernal realm for the abyssal fruit, not to listen to your quarrel. Granny Night Ghost spoke up as well. Patriarch Herculean had always had a fiery temper. Just as he was about to speak, Patriarch Golden Light stopped him with a glance. Don't be rash. We'll talk about this later. Patriarch Golden Light sent a voice transmission to Patriarch Herculean. Patriarch Herculean clenched his fists so tightly that they creaked. Then, he snorted coldly and turned to the side, not looking at Patriarch Wooling. This old fellow is truly despicable. If I have the chance, I must kill him. Otherwise, he will only be a scourge, Patriarch Wooling thought coldly. At some point in time, the reception platform had fallen silent. The 5 old monsters were all silent. Granny Night Ghost even sat cross-legged on the platform, meditating and adjusting her breathing. About 3 days passed. The ghostly fire in the eyes of the giant skull on the reception platform suddenly expanded. It opened its mouth and let out a sinister voice. Welcome to the Weeping Ghost Mountain. Each person who enters the mountain must pay 10 ghost stones. Otherwise, you will suffer a calamity. Granny Night Ghost opened her eyes. With a flip of her palm, she tossed 10 pitch-black stones into the skull's mouth. Patriarch Wooling and the others did the same. Ghost stones were the currency of hell. They were equivalent to the primordial stones of the outside world, but they were countless times more precious. The Weeping Ghost Mountain was rather strange. If one didn't hand over the ghost stones, they would indeed suffer a series of misfortune. One of the old monsters who traveled with Patriarch Wooling refused to hand over the ghost stones because he didn't believe in this. As a result, he heard the sound of ghosts crying from the moment he entered the Weeping Ghost Mountain. In the end, he had a mental breakdown and disappeared inside the Een Mountain. As people from the outside world, the 5 of them naturally didn't have any ghost stones. However, they could rob in hell. Some of the more powerful ghosts would always have 1 or 2 ghost stones. Accumulating them, it wasn't difficult to get 10 ghost stones. After handing over 10 ghost stones, Patriarch Wooling still had 14 ghost stones. It was enough for him to do it again. "You are all generous people. Please enter the mountain." The skull cackled. The red lanterns on both sides of the stone path leading to the reception platform lit up one by one. "Let's go." Old Man Enyang led the way and walked on the stone path. The moment the 5 of them walked on the stone path, the mournful sound of a zither rang out. It was as if there was a large band performing around them. "Damn, this is strange," Patriarch Herculean cursed. The 5 of them walked further and further away. Finally, they disappeared at the end of the stone path. On the reception platform, the skull cackled. 38 more. 38 more. Not far. Chapter 12:37. The 500,000 feet tall Wailing Ghost Mountain had a total of 49 layers of seals. In other words, there was a seal every 100,000 feet long. The 100,000 feet long mark was just the surface height. The 5 of them could easily pass through the first 20 layers without having to work together. The remaining 10 layers were not difficult either. It would just take them some time. The 31st layer became more difficult. Back then, Patriarch Wooling had spent a lot of effort and even suffered injuries to reach the 38th layer. It was also because of his injuries that he stopped at the 38th layer. The 35th layer. The 36th layer. The 38th layer. Finally, Patriarch Wooling arrived at the 39th layer. There were no enemies on the 39th layer. There was only a staircase leading to the 40th layer. The staircase was about 13,333 meters long. Of course, Patriarch Wooling and the other 4 did not think that the staircase was that simple. There must be something more to it. As expected, the moment they stepped on the staircase, the 5 of them immediately felt a gravitational force pressing down on them. "So it's a test of resistance to gravity." Patriarch Hercules smiled confidently. As a barbarian quasi-venerable, he was very satisfied with his physical body. He was also a body cultivator. "Interesting. That suits me." Night Ghost Granny laughed. 30,000 meters. 60,000 meters. 90,000 meters. 100,000 meters. After 100,000 meters, the first person to feel the strain was Enyang South. In terms of strength, he might not be the strongest among the 5, but he was definitely in the top 3. However, in terms of resistance to gravity, he was the last. If Yi Chen appeared, he would definitely find that the gravity here was countless times stronger than that of a white dwarf star. Neutron stars were nothing compared to it. Ordinary top emperors would be crushed into powder in an instant. 11,000 meters. Patriarch Wooling's forehead was covered in cold sweat. There are 23,333 meters left. I have to get through it. Patriarch Wooling's physical body was not weak, but compared to Patriarch Hercules, Night Ghost Granny, and Patriarch Golden Light, he was undoubtedly much weaker. 12,000 meters. Apart from Patriarch Wooling and the other 2, Enyang So's bones were already making creaking sounds, as if they would be crushed at any time. Patriarch Wooling was slightly better, but he was also at the end of his rope. "Enyang extreme change." Enyang So shouted and a shadow condensed behind him. The silhouette was exactly the same as his, but the expression was extremely cold. It did not seem illusory. Old Ancestor Wooling tilted his head to look at Enyang So, and a trace of fear appeared on his face. With his eyesight, he could naturally tell that Inyang-so had shifted a portion of the gravity to the figure behind him. No one dared to underestimate such a miraculous ability. Patriarch Hercules and the other two also knew about Inyang-so's ability. There were no treasures appearing at the moment, and there were no conflicts between them. Once a precious treasure appeared, everyone would be a competitor. In this place there was no distinction between races. Who would have the last laugh? Inyang-so of Mountain. Patriarch Wuling suddenly let out a low shout, and a five-colored armor appeared on his body. The moment the armor appeared, the vast and mighty gravity disappeared like a clay ox in the sea. Only a few % of the gravity could affect Patriarch Wuling. This was the five-elemental armor formed by the five-colored space. It had its own space inside. Although it looked like a thin layer, for gravity to affect Wuling Patriarch's body, it would need to travel tens of millions of miles. In the end, the five of them successfully reached the 40th floor. During this time, only Inyang Old Man and Wuling Patriarch had revealed some of their trump cards. Herculean Patriarch, Golden Light Patriarch, and Night Ghost Granny had relied on their powerful bodies to hold on. When they reached the 40th floor, the five of them did not attempt the trial immediately. Instead, they each found a place to sit down and took out the inner cores of the water monsters to replenish their energy. Although the 39th floor was not dangerous, the consumption was too great. At every moment, energy was flowing away like water. After half a cup of tea's time, the five of them opened their eyes one after another. 49 layers of seals. Every 10 layers, the difficulty will increase by 1 level. Now, we must all work together. We'll talk when the treasure appears, Night Ghost Granny said in a hoarse voice. That would be best. Inyang Old Man nodded. The shadow behind him did not disappear. Instead, it became more solid. The environment of the 40th floor made one's heart numb. As far as the eye could see, it was a boundless black void. Above them were layers of dark clouds, and below them was an immeasurably deep abyss. As for how deep it was impossible to tell. As soon as their soul powers entered it, they immediately disappeared. What made the five of them startled was that this black void obviously had a forbidden formation. The five of them wanted to fly up, but they could only jump 30 to 50 zhang. Any higher and they would fall back down. There was nothing they could do to stop it. Thankfully, the black void was connected by a chain so thick that it would take 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Although the chain was covered in rust, it at least looked very sturdy. Patriarch Golden Light's golden strike wave was unable to cut through the chain. There are 10 chains here. We'll choose the 5 in the middle. If we find any enemies, we'll work together to kill them. Does anyone have any objections? Inyang Old Man said. I'll choose this one. Night Ghost Granny chose the 3rd chain. She was a cautious person and did not want to be stuck in the middle. Next, Golden Light Patriarch and Hercules Patriarch chose the 6th and 7th chains respectively. Inyang Old Man chose the 4th. Haha, I have fate with 5. I'll take the 5th one. There was only 1 chain left in the middle. He had no choice, but he did not care. The 5 of them were very fast. In the blink of an eye, they had traveled a long distance. They still could not see the stone platform behind them. It was covered by the black void. Suddenly, Ancestor Golden Light pointed down and said with slight surprise, "What's that?" In the depths of the black void below, 2 huge lights were approaching. They were dozens of feet in size. Wuling Old Ancestor scanned them with his soul force, and his heart skipped a beat. How were these lights? They were clearly a pair of eyes, and the strangest thing was that he could only see the eyes. He couldn't see who the owner of these eyes was. It was as if his body had merged with the black void. Ghost beasts, Wuling Patriarch said. Oh, you know them? Everyone looked at Wuling Patriarch. Wuling Patriarch explained, Ghost beasts are not pure ghosts. They are ferocious ghosts formed by countless ghosts. The weakest ghost beast is equivalent to a grade 1 mountain ghost. They are not easy to deal with. In hell, mountain ghost was a title. It was not a type of ghost. There were 3 types of powerful ghosts. From the weakest to the strongest, they were Yellow Springs Ghost, Nether Ghost, and Impermanence Ghost. These 3 types of ghosts could become mountain ghosts. Of course, Impermanence Ghosts were much stronger than mountain ghosts of the same level. Then what is the level of the ghost beast below? Young Old Man asked. Wuling Patriarch examined it carefully and said hesitantly, "This is my first time seeing a ghost beast. But there is a red line in its eyes. It is at least a grade 1 mountain ghost." This time, Wuling Patriarch was wrong. Ghost beasts did use the red line in their eyes to identify their strength, but he did not realize that there was a darker red line below the red line. In other words, this ghost beast already had the strength of a grade 2 mountain ghost. Chapter 12:38. Everyone, don't disturb it. Although it's approaching, it hasn't attacked yet. There's still room for maneuver, said Patriarch Wuling. Although he wasn't afraid of a grade 1 mountain ghost, ghosts were the hardest to kill. The Nether Ghost that guarded the entrance to hell wasn't even a grade 1 mountain ghost, but it still wouldn't be able to kill him in a short amount of time. Patriarch Wuling estimated that even if the 5 of them worked together, they wouldn't be able to kill it in less than an hour. Unfortunately, old Ancestor Wuling's words were in vain. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying roar came from below. Then, the pair of red eyes grew larger and larger, and a bone-chilling wind swept up from below. Everyone stopped in their tracks. The night ghost Granny's cloudy eyes shone brightly as she said in a low voice, "Everyone, let's work together to kill this beast. Otherwise, both you and I will be in danger." As she spoke, the night ghost Granny shook her walking stick. Countless staff shadows shot down from above and towards the ghost beast. However, it wasn't the staff shadows that landed on the ghost beast first. Instead, it was a golden beam of light from Patriarch Golden Light. The golden beam of light was dazzling and as thick as a bucket. The black void below was also dyed by the intense golden light. They could vaguely see a huge shadow rising up and rushing towards the 5 of them. Next, Patriarch Wuling spread his fingers and slammed down with a palm print. The palm print was colorful. After it left his palm, it grew larger and larger until it was twice the size of the shadow below. It seemed to be endless and could contain the heavens and earth. Inyang So's attack was the strangest. He stretched out his right hand and a stream of air formed in his palm. Then, the shadow behind him injected some power into the stream of air. Immediately, the transparent stream of air turned chaotic. In the blur, one could see the dividing line between the 2 streams of air. It was similar to the Tai Chi Yin-Yang diagram. The last to attack was the Herculean ancestor. His attack was much simpler. He simply threw a punch downwards. However, no one dared to underestimate this punch. It contained the most powerful esoteric power. As the punch was thrown, the power acted on the black sky, creating endless ripples. Ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, boom. First, a ball of dazzling light exploded. That was old Ancestor Golden Light's golden light pillar colliding with the ghost beast. Then, countless staff shadows descended from the sky and struck the ghost beast, forcing it to pause for a moment. Then, old Ancestor Wuling's 5-colored palm imprint arrived. It was like a huge, ancient mountain pressing down on the ghost beast, pressing it down for dozens of miles. Just as the ghost beast rushed up again, old Ancestor Inyang's chaotic air current flashed like a dim meteor and drilled into the ghost beast's body. In the next moment, the ghost beast let out a shrill roar. Chaotic flames exploded from its body, almost drowning half of its body. That was not the end. Old Ancestor Herculean's fist wind was thousands of times stronger than the most violent whirlwind in the starry sky. With a shake and a blow, half of the ghost beast's body began to disintegrate and melt. The next moment, the ghost beast's body began to melt. This old monster is not to be underestimated? Patriarch Wuling's pupils shrank. The power of Patriarch Hercules made him wary. If it had been a normal ghost beast, it would have been seriously injured under the combined attack of the 5 of them. However, this ghost beast was many times stronger than they had imagined. It turned around in its illusory state and absorbed the disintegrating half of its body back into its body. Its ferocity did not diminish as it flew towards the night ghost Granny, who was the closest to it. "You're asking for it." The night ghost Granny was not afraid at all. Her skinny body suddenly expanded, growing from 1.5 meters to almost 2 meters. A pair of wings spread out behind her, covering the sky like 2 black clouds. The walking stick in her hand suddenly changed shape, turning into a long spear that glowed with a gray light. Holy shadow light! With the gray spear in her hand, the night ghost Granny let out a low growl and smashed the spear down. The spear shone brilliantly, but in the depths of the light, there was an inexhaustible shadow. The light and the shadow coexisted, and it was a strange sight. Holy shadow light, it looks like your light ultimacy and shadow ultimacy have merged even more deeply. Inyang Old Man was the person who was most familiar with the night ghost Granny. Although she had not created a supreme martial art, she had created a lesser supreme martial art. The so-called lesser supreme martial art was a martial art that contained ultimacy. Although it was not as powerful as the 5 elements, yin and yang, light and darkness, or time and space, it was a system of its own. Light and shadow were natural opposites, and they were more profound than water and fire. Of course, light ultimacy was not light ultimacy. There were differences between the two. Light ultimacy was purer, while light ultimacy was more inclusive. In comparison, lesser supreme martial arts were far inferior to supreme martial art. However, lesser supreme martial arts were easier to increase in power. After all, before becoming a supreme, everyone was just scratching the surface. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the ghost beast and the night ghost Granny clashed. Inyang Old Man and the others were shocked. The night ghost Granny was not the ghost beast's opponent. She flew backward and was about to fall into the black void. Whoosh whoosh. The wings on her back flapped crazily and the night ghost Granny landed on the 10th chain. Her face was gloomy. This beast is not just a grade 1 mountain ghost. It must be a grade 2 mountain ghost. Although she had not used 100% of her strength, she had used at least 90% of it. Hearing this, Ancestor Wooling took advantage of the moment when the ghost beast was stopped by the night ghost Granny to look at its eyes. Under the bright red line, there was a dim red line. It was indeed not a grade 1 mountain ghost. He laughed bitterly and said, "It is indeed not a grade 1 mountain ghost. It was my mistake." After being stopped by the night ghost Granny, the ghost beast did not attack again. It clearly knew that with its strength, it could only fight 1 or 2 of them. There were 5 of them. With its strength, it could not devour them at all. If the fight dragged on, it would probably be the one to lose. Roar! The ghost beast roared, and the sound waves spread into the depths of the black void. Ancestor Wooling frowned. He had a bad feeling. Not good. It's calling for its companions. The first to sense that something was wrong was Ancestor Golden Light. His eyes seemed to be made of gold, and he could see very far into the black void. Roar, 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 roar. As soon as Ancestor Golden Light finished speaking, countless roars came from below. Countless pairs of eyes, like bright lamps, appeared one after another. It was impossible to count them all. Few of these eyes had a red line, but there were so many of them. It should be known that ordinary ghost beasts had the strength of an ordinary quasi-venerate. With so many of them, only a supreme being would be able to kill anyone who encountered them. Run! Without any hesitation, the 5 of them rushed forward along the chain. They could not let the ghost beasts surround them, or they would die without a doubt. Chapter 1239. Night Ghost Granny's speed was the fastest. The pair of wings on her back flapped violently, and she instantly traveled hundreds of kilometers. Next was Patriarch Golden Light, followed by Patriarch Inyang Sad and Patriarch Wooling. Patriarch Herculean's speed was the slowest, but that was only in comparison. He stepped on the chains, and every step he took covered 100 to 200 kilometers. Unfortunately, there were too many ghost beasts. The entire black void was filled with ghost beasts, and the roars of these ghost beasts contained soul attacks. Everyone could withstand a single ghost beast's roar, but when hundreds and thousands of ghost beasts roared together, the terrifying soul sound waves were like a tsunami that spread in all directions. Patriarch Wooling grunted. His soul felt as though it had been struck by lightning, and he felt a piercing pain. This is only the Een Mountain of Level 3 mountain ghosts. Why are there so many ghost beasts? Patriarch Wooling couldn't figure it out. While he was in a daze, Patriarch Wooling's vision blurred. 7 ghost beasts appeared in front of him, blocking his path. Earth 1, come out. In the past, Patriarch Wooling could deal with 7 ordinary ghost beasts alone. However, now was the time to fight for time. If he was a step slower, he might be devoured by the following ghost beasts. With a wave of his hand, Yi Chen, Scarlet Wind Emperor, and Fire Sparrow Emperor appeared at the same time. Attack! As he spoke, Patriarch Wooling took the lead to attack, and a 5-colored palm pressed over. Just like Patriarch Wooling, Yi Chen and the other 2 waved their palms and attacked fiercely. Their palm techniques were exactly the same as Patriarch Wooling's, and they all contained the 5 elemental profundity. Boom! The profundity contained in supreme martial arts was flawless, and it also had a strong destructive power against ghost beasts. 4 5-colored palm prints blasted out side by side, and an opening was immediately blasted out. Swoosh! Patriarch Wooling put away Yi Chen and the other 2, and his figure flashed as he rushed over through the opening. Gradually, everyone could see the stone platform on the other side. Once they reached it, they could leave the 40th level and enter the 41st level seal. Scram! Behind them, Patriarch Herculean was blocked by the strongest ghost beast. Both sides fought wildly, and Patriarch Herculean's angry voice could be heard from time to time. Even the heavens are helping me. This old monster is dead for sure. Old Ancestor Wooling glanced back and revealed a smile. If he were to make a move against Old Ancestor Herculean, the chances of him killing Old Ancestor Herculean were close to 0. However, once Old Ancestor Herculean was surrounded by ghost beasts, as long as he was not a prime, he would not have any hope of surviving. Unfortunately, before Patriarch Wooling's smile could be fully displayed, he saw a scene that shocked and angered him. A disc had appeared in Herculean Patriarch's hand. The disc was black and white, and there was a black and white air current slowly flowing in the center. Herculean Patriarch flicked his hand, and the disc flew into the air. In the next moment, a black air current shot toward Herculean Patriarch, and a white air current landed on Wooling Patriarch. Then, Patriarch Wooling felt time and space change. When he came back to his senses, there was no longer nothing in front of him. Instead, it was the strongest ghost beast. Patriarch Hercules had appeared in front of him and was running for his life. Old Herculean monster, I'm not done with you. Patriarch Wooling's eyes were bloodshot. How could he not tell that the black and white disc was a treasure that could shift positions? It could switch positions with another target. Unfortunately, he had become Patriarch Herculean Patriarch's target. Old Herculean monster, I'm sorry. We'll meet again at the 41st seal. I hope to see you again. Patriarch Herculean Patriarch chuckled and continued running without looking back. Damn it. When I escape, I'll definitely make you pay the price in blood. Patriarch Wooling hated Patriarch Herculean to the bone. If not for Patriarch Herculean Patriarch, he would have reached the stone platform on the other side without any danger. However, he also knew that he had to get rid of this ghost beast leader as soon as possible. Although this ghost beast leader, which was equivalent to a level 2 mountain ghost, found it strange that its opponent had changed, it did not care. What it needed were souls. It did not matter who it was. Roar! The ghost beast leader was not in a hurry to attack. It roared and summoned its subordinates. 5 elements seal. Patriarch Wuling forced himself to calm down. He stretched out his palm and flipped it over. Immediately, a 5-colored cube enveloped the ghost beast leader, trapping it inside. 5 elements escape technique. After doing all this, Patriarch Wuling's body emitted an astonishing 5-colored light. He turned into a 5-colored meteor and shot out. However, as soon as he left, the 5-colored seal collapsed. How could the ghost beast leader watch its prey escape? It opened its huge mouth and a black flame shot out. It instantly collided with the 5-colored meteor. Poochie! As if a spark had landed on a cotton cloth, the 5-colored light immediately tore a small hole. Patriarch Wuling's speed suddenly decreased. He was like a leaking ball and began to become unstable. Hell's fire! Patriarch Wuling exclaimed. The black flame that the ghost beast leader spat out wasn't an ordinary flame. It was the most mystical Hell's fire. Hell's fire contained the will of Hell and could burn almost anything. Even a soul that came into contact with it would turn into ashes, never to be reincarnated. He did not expect that the ghost beast leader had mastered a trace of Hell's fire. The short period of instability caused Patriarch Wuling to be completely surrounded by ghost beasts. There were ghost beasts everywhere. At a glance, there were hundreds of them. Damn it, you forced me to use the puppet array. I will definitely take revenge for this. As a quasi-venerable, old ancestor, Wuling's ability to survive was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. His hands rapidly formed hand seals. In an instant, he had formed thousands of hand seals. Suddenly, with a low roar, a huge circular formation descended from the sky and landed on the ground. One figure after another appeared in the circular formation. These figures were not real people. Instead, they were wooden people. These wooden people were like a tide. They were born in a frenzy. Soon, their numbers surpassed the ghost beasts by 10 times, and they were still increasing. The puppet array was one of the heaven-seizing puppet's secret technique. This array could continuously create wooden puppet. Although each wooden puppet only had 1% of Patriarch Wuling's strength, they had the advantage in numbers. In order to refine this array, Patriarch Wuling had spent countless years, endless energy, and countless materials. Sometimes, he would think that if he had not spent so much time on the heaven-seizing puppet's secret technique, he might have already become a paragon. With the obstruction and impact of the puppet array, Patriarch Wuling successfully broke out of the encirclement. Just as he was about to enter the 41st seal, Patriarch Wuling looked back with a pained expression. He had not used this puppet array many times in his life. In the past, when he used it, he could recycle it. Now, he could only waste it here. Old monster Herculean. With a furious roar, Patriarch Wuling rushed into the 41st seal. Behind him, tens of thousands of wooden puppets had already emerged from the puppet array. These wooden puppets contained Patriarch Wuling's martial will and the power of the 5 elements. They were more or less harmful to ghost beasts. Chapter 1240. When Ancestor Hercules saw Wuling Old Ancestor appear at the 41st layer of the seal, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. As a quasi-venerable old monster who had lived for nearly 100,000 years, it was impossible for him not to have some life-saving abilities. If he had one, then others definitely had one as well. However, he didn't know what Wuling Old Ancestor's life-saving ability was. Herculean old monster, I'll fight you to the death. Patriarch Wuling acted as though he had seen his enemy. He immediately summoned Yi Chen and the other 2 to attack Patriarch Herculean. You think I'm afraid of you? This time, it was Ancestor Wuling who took action. Ancestor Hercules felt that he was on the right side. A punch was thrown out, and the boundless fist energy acted on the void, stirring up waves of ripples. Everything in the world was in a state of movement, and movement required power. Even the operation of one's thoughts required power to be propelled. When the profound meaning of power reached its limit, it would be close to the great completion of a supreme martial art. In the early stages, one's power would be able to defeat everything. Boom! Old Ancestor Wuling was sent flying. He wasn't Old Ancestor Herculean's match in a head-on confrontation. His opponent wasn't an ordinary quasi-venerable either. However, Patriarch Wuling wasn't just that. He was just testing how strong Patriarch Herculean was. Great Five Elements Capture. As Wuling Patriarch retreated, his hands formed seals at lightning speed. In the next moment, a huge and majestic five-colored shadow appeared behind him. It was like a god, and when the god opened its eyes, the sky and earth changed color. As Wuling Patriarch extended his palm, the five-colored shadow's huge palm also reached out and grabbed Patriarch Hercules. Good, look at my totem golden body. Physique refinement kings were already superior to other martial artists in terms of spirit body. What was more terrifying was that physique refinement kings could also cultivate body-refining martial arts like the 9 Revolutions golden body and the totem golden body. Even if they were at the same rank 8 spirit body or rank 9 spirit body, the one who cultivated the 9 Revolutions golden body or the totem golden body would be more than twice or even 10 times stronger than their opponent. Just by relying on their mortal body, they would be invincible. Suddenly, the Herculean ancestor's body shone with an intense dark golden light. On the surface of his skin, dark golden light patterns started to converge. These light patterns were like living creatures, drilling and drilling around his skin, eventually forming into a perfect totem tattoo. Buzz. The moment the totem tattoo was formed, the five-colored hand reached out. Patriarch Hercules let him grab him. Crunch. The five-colored hand grabbed the Herculean Patriarch and suddenly exerted force as if it wanted to crush his body. However, no matter how much force the five-colored hand exerted, the Herculean Patriarch remained impregnable. The dark golden tattoos on his body even pushed the five-colored hand away a little, not giving it the best angle to exert force. One of the 5 great body-tempering martial arts of the barbarian tribe, totem golden body? Old Ancestor Wuling frowned. The barbarian tribe basically walked the path of body refinement, and they had the most powerful body refinement martial arts. There were only 1 or 2 in the human tribe that could compare to the 5 great body refinement martial arts of the barbarian tribe. As for the spirit tribe, there was none. Old man, take a punch from me as well. The power of the five-colored hand grew weaker. Herculean Patriarch gave a low shout and broke free of the five-colored hand's restraints. Then, he punched at Wuling Patriarch. This punch was incomparably ferocious, incomparably wild. The powerful fist force even affected the surrounding space, making everyone feel as though they had returned to the primordial era. At this moment, Wuling Ancestor's old strength had already been used up and he hadn't gathered any new strength. In a hurry, he definitely wouldn't be able to block this fist. Although even if he forcefully attacked, the other party wouldn't be able to hurt him in a short period of time. He would still lose face. Earth first! Wuling Patriarch ordered. Yi Chen blocked in front of Wuling Patriarch and struck out with his palm. There was a loud bang. A large amount of blood spurted out from the corner of Yi Chen's mouth as he flew backward. Herculean Patriarch's fist force had been blocked and weakened by more than half. It was easily destroyed by Wuling Patriarch. What a powerful puppet! Herculean Patriarch looked at Yi Chen in shock. He didn't take Yi Chen seriously at first. He thought that it was just an ordinary puppet that had at most 50% of Wuling Patriarch's strength. However, that attack just now had at least 70 to 80% of Wuling Patriarch's strength. A genius of the human tribe? Patriarch Golden Light's eyes were sharp. Although the aura that Yi Chen emitted came from the same source as Wuling Patriarch's, there was a faint hint of something else. I wonder where this old monster found such a top genius of the human tribe. Patriarch Golden Light's expression was a little gloomy. The human tribe and the demon tribe were one. They would prosper together and suffer together. Such a genius of the human tribe would definitely be a great general in the future. His eyes turned and Patriarch Golden Light looked at Wuling Patriarch with a cold gaze. However, this coldness was quickly hidden. As for Yi Chen, he had been sent flying by Herculean Patriarch. He had used up a lot of his 5-element power. His power came from Wuling Patriarch, so he had to constantly replenish it in order to maintain his peak state. However, no one knew that after this attack, Yi Chen's eyes flashed with the light of spiritual wisdom. He glanced at Wuling Patriarch and the light of spiritual wisdom quickly dimmed, becoming no different from before. Enough! Old Man Yinyang stepped forward to mediate. Old Man Yinyang ignored Yi Chen and said to Old Man Yinyang in a low voice, "Old Man Yinyang, we agreed that we would join forces to fight when we enter. However, this old bastard actually plotted against me. If I didn't have some life-saving abilities, I would have died on the 40th level. This matter definitely won't end so easily." Old Man Yinyang looked at Old Man Yinyang and said coldly, "Is this true? So what if it is? So what if it isn't? I've already joined forces to fight. As for the other things, you didn't say anything, and I didn't agree." He had found a loophole. "It seems that you aren't sincere." Granny Night Ghost also stood on Old Man Yinyang's side. "Alright, this is a misunderstanding. We haven't found the abyssal fruit tree yet, but we've already started fighting. Aren't you afraid that all our efforts will go to waste?" Patriarch Golden Light knew that it was time for him to speak. He couldn't let Old Man Yinyang become the target of everyone. After all, Old Man Yinyang was the closest to him. "Old Man Golden Light, nothing can be accomplished without rules. I don't trust him. Leave." Old Man Yinyang threatened. "Heh." Patriarch Golden Light laughed, then said in a sinister voice, "Since that's the case, then let's fight." No one can even dream of acquiring the abyssal fruit. He was certain that the other side wouldn't choose to fight. "You." Old Man Yinyang was enraged. Old Man Yinyang gave Patriarch Golden Light a deep look. He was silent for a moment, then said slowly, "Let's drop this matter for now. I'll say the ugly words first. In the future, if anyone dares to ignore our agreement, I will kill them, even at the cost of being injured." As he spoke, a sinister, murderous look flashed through his eyes. He had already made up his mind. After acquiring the abyssal fruit, he would join forces with Granny Night Ghost and Old Man Yinyang to forcefully kill Old Man Yinyang and Patriarch Golden Light. In any case, prior to coming here, he hadn't planned on splitting the abyssal fruit evenly. To him, the more abyssal fruits he had, the better. Fine. Actually, if it wasn't for the fact that the situation was dire, I wouldn't have acted in such a manner. Old Man Yinyang gave himself a way out of this awkward situation. Of everyone present, the one he feared the most was Old Man Yinyang. He couldn't see through this old fellow. Chapter 1241. The 41st level was a desolate and cold desert. It was vast and boundless. In this desert there would be a tower every few hundred miles. The towers stretched from the lowest to the highest, stretching all the way into the distance. Rumble, a huge dragon-like black whirlwind suddenly appeared in the distance. Before the whirlwind even got close, a piercing chill blew over and frost formed on the surface of the desert. "What's this?" Old Ancestor Wuling had a bad feeling. This whirlwind had caused his soul sea to become slightly unstable. Take a detour. Yinyang Kajar didn't dare to be careless and chose to take a detour. Unexpectedly, the whirlwind also started to change direction. Humph! Old Ancestor Hercules snorted and punched. The illusory fist shadow affected the void and struck the whirlwind. However, what surprised everyone was that although the fist shadow caused the whirlwind to disperse a little, the actual lethality wasn't that great. It was as if the whirlwind was nothing. In the blink of an eye, the black whirlwind was already near the 5 of them. Everyone looked closely and instantly felt their blood run cold. This wasn't an ordinary whirlwind. It was clearly a ghostly whirlwind formed by countless ghostly creatures. Ghostly figures were faintly discernible within. It's the Yellow Spring Storm. It's filled with Yellow Spring's ghosts. Old Ancestor Wooling's hair stood on end as he exclaimed. The Yellow Spring Storm was one of the most terrifying storms in hell. This storm wasn't formed naturally but was formed by mixing Yellow Spring's ghosts. Even the rarest impermanence ghosts in hell had to retreat when encountering the Yellow Spring Storm. This was because after the Yellow Spring Storm was formed by the Yellow Spring's ghosts, their disadvantages were weakened and their advantages were strengthened. Once one was caught in it, they would immediately become a part of it. Old Ancestor Wooling began to suspect if Ghost Weeping Mountain was the territory of a Grade 3 mountain ghost. How could an ordinary Grade 3 mountain ghost have a large number of ghost beasts and a Yellow Spring Storm? However, it made sense. Since this place was sealed, it was definitely unusual. Seal it. How could Inyang Kajar allow the Yellow Spring Storm to get close to him? He quickly formed a seal with both hands and a ball of white air formed in front of him. Shortly after, the illusory figure behind him injected a black air current into the white air current. In the next moment, a black and white yin-yang diagram enveloped the Yellow Spring Storm and completely restrained it. Patriarch Wooling wasn't slow either. The 5-element seal descended from the sky and enveloped the Netherworld Storm and the black-white yin-yang image. Patriarch Golden Light also unleashed his own golden light dimension. Numerous mirrors that emitted intense golden light combined together. The golden light was blinding to the eyes. As for the Night Ghost Granny and the Herculean Ancestor, they weren't good at trapping, so they didn't interfere. After doing all this, the 5 of them rushed forward at full speed. Although the 3 layers of seals could trap any quasi-venerable for a very long time, the Yellow Spring Storm was much more terrifying than a quasi-venerable. About a quarter of an hour later, a loud explosion came from behind them. The 5 of them knew that the seal had been broken. Rumble! The entire desert seemed to be trembling. The Yellow Spring Storm chased after them at a speed 10 times faster than before. One could see that as the speed increased, the thickness of the Yellow Spring Storm was also shrinking. However, with the distance between the two sides, the Yellow Spring Storm could catch up to the 5 of them if it shrunk by 10%. At that time, any of the 5 of them would be in danger if they were caught. It's too fast. In just 100 breaths, it will catch up to us. Patriarch Wooling's heart sank after calculating the distance. Regardless of whether he had the strength or not, he didn't want to fight to the death with the Yellow Spring Storm. That would be a foolish move that would harm himself. The Yellow Spring Storm was getting closer and closer to the 5 of them. The entire Crying Ghost Mountain contained a unique sealing law that prevented teleportation. It would be good if they could reach 1,000th of the speed in space. Rumble! Good things never come in pairs, but misfortune never comes alone. The surface of the desert not far from the 5 of them suddenly collapsed. A pitch-black whirlwind rushed up. It was another Yellow Spring Storm. Because the distance was too close, and the 5 of them maintained their maximum speed, they couldn't react in time. They could only subconsciously turn left and right. The result was obvious. The 5 of them were split in 2. Old Inyang Man, the Night Ghost Granny, and the Herculean Ancestor flew to the right, while Patriarch Golden Light and Patriarch Wooling chose the left. Lure it away from me. Patriarch Wooling flicked his hand, and a figure flew in another direction. Upon closer inspection, one would see that it was the Stone Emperor with a dull expression. Unfortunately, the Yellow Spring Storm didn't care about the Stone Emperor at all. It continued to chase after Patriarch Wooling and Patriarch Herculean. Could it be that this Yellow Spring Storm is only interested in powerful souls? Patriarch Wooling guessed. There was no time to think. Patriarch Golden Light and Patriarch Wooling's expressions changed again. In front of them, the desert exploded, and the 3rd Yellow Spring Storm appeared. Damn it! Patriarch Wooling hurriedly turned right, and Patriarch Golden Light flashed left. Just like that, the two of them had a yellow spring storm behind them, and they ran for their lives. After chasing for a long time, the yellow spring storm howled. As the wind howled, the yellow spring storm's speed increased tenfold, just like the first yellow spring storm. Sensing the movement behind him, Patriarch Wooling's pupils shrank. Fight! Patriarch Wooling flew toward the nearest tower. He was betting that the tower could defend against the yellow spring storm and buy him a breath of time. As for how he would escape, that was a matter for later. 1,000 miles. 500 miles. 300 miles. Patriarch Wooling was getting closer and closer to the nearest tower, but the yellow spring storm behind him was getting closer and closer. It was less than 25 miles away. Given the yellow spring storm's speed, it would catch up before Patriarch Wooling could reach it. A pained expression flashed across Patriarch Wooling's face. He made his second difficult choice. He waved his hand and a 5-colored light flashed. A figure charged towards the yellow spring storm. It was Yi Chen. Yi Chen's soul was far more powerful than that of ordinary sovereigns. Although he couldn't compare to powerful sovereigns in terms of quantity, in terms of quality, he surpassed them by quite a bit. He wasn't inferior to a quasi-exalt. At this moment, Patriarch Wooling had no choice but to abandon Yi Chen. It was just like how he had abandoned his most precious golem formation on the 40th level. If I can't obtain the abyssal fruit this time, I'll have suffered a double loss. Yi Chen was one of the best materials he had seen in all these years. Perhaps he was the best. Yi Chen had nearly 80% of his original body's strength. This was much more precious than anything else. If his life wasn't in danger, he wouldn't abandon Yi Chen even if he was beaten to death. Patriarch Wooling couldn't help but hate Patriarch Hercules even more. If Patriarch Hercules hadn't plotted against him, he could have used the golem formation to block the yellow spring storm and buy some time for him. He wouldn't have needed to abandon Yi Chen. Patriarch Hercules, just you wait. With a low roar, Patriarch Wooling scurried into the tower. The moment he was thrown out, Yi Chen had already woken up. Of course, when he had clashed with Patriarch Hercules, Yi Chen had already woken up quite a bit. Although Patriarch Wooling's control over him was strong, there was a limit. After clashing with Patriarch Hercules, this control had been greatly weakened. Given Yi Chen's willpower, he had naturally seized control of his mind. However, due to Patriarch Wooling's strength, Yi Chen had been hiding his sobriety. At this moment, Yi Chen's vision was filled by a dragon-like yellow spring storm. The next moment, his entire body was submerged in the yellow spring storm. Chapter 1242. Swoosh. Taking advantage of the short moment when the yellow spring storm engulfed Yi Chen, Patriarch Wooling rushed into the tall pagoda. There was nothing else on the first floor of the tall pagoda. There was only a black stone tablet with 6 blood-colored words written on it. Those who enter this place will die. This place? Patriarch Wooling knew that the other party should be referring to the 41st floor seal and not the tall pagoda. When he arrived at the second floor, there was the same stone tablet and the same words. The third floor was the same. Patriarch Wooling's heart gradually sank. If the other party was not exaggerating, then this place was really very dangerous. The 6 blood-colored words were like a brand, deeply imprinted in the depths of Patriarch Wooling's soul. Forget it. If I can successfully leave this place this time, I won't come back in the future. Patriarch Wooling was afraid. This place was too strange. It was not something a quasi-venerate like him could do. When he returned to the first floor, Patriarch Wooling stood at the door and looked at the yellow spring storm that engulfed Yi Chen. This child is talented. What a pity. Patriarch Wooling sighed inwardly. Then, he sat down cross-legged and recovered his spiritual yuan. Inside the yellow spring storm, an illusory Yi Chen was pulled out. This was Yi Chen's soul. On this soul, there were densely packed 5-colored threads and runes. The key to Patriarch Wooling's control over Yi Chen was these 5-colored threads and runes. Crack! As the yellow spring storm spun intensely, the 5-colored threads and runes broke and disintegrated inch by inch. The runes disintegrated. Inside the tall pagoda, Patriarch Wooling's expression was gloomy. In fact, in the depths of his heart, he still had a glimmer of hope that Yi Chen could survive. Now, this hope was shattered. The runes were broken, and Yi Chen's soul would not be any better. It would definitely be completely engulfed by the yellow spring storm and disappear from this world. The yellow spring storm did not have much lethality to the physical body, but it was fatal to the soul. Yi Chen felt as if his soul had entered a meat grinder. At every moment it was spinning and slicing thousands of times. But at this moment, the uniqueness of Yi Chen's soul was also reflected. Not to mention the soul of an ordinary emperor, even the soul of a quasi-venerable would not be able to resist the yellow spring storm and would become weaker and weaker. Apart from being weakened at the beginning, Yi Chen's soul gradually rebounded. The stronger the pressure, the stronger the rebound. An inextinguishable soul fire burned fiercely. In fact, the souls that had awakened the eye of the soul were all special. The will of the universe had given them an inextinguishable characteristic. Of course, it was not absolutely inextinguishable, but to a certain extent. In addition, Yi Chen's immortal sword soul also played an inextinguishable role. Without the immortal sword soul, Yi Chen's soul would not have been able to withstand it a long time ago. The inextinguishable flame burned and the immortal radiance bloomed. Yi Chen's soul was as transparent as a god. Gradually, his soul returned to his body. Yi Chen opened his eyes. The will of hell. So that's how it is. At this moment, Yi Chen vaguely understood what hell was. If his guess was correct, hell should be the negative side of the universe, equivalent to the projection of the universe. And the will of hell was also the negative side of the universe, one positive and one negative. The yellow spring storm was still spinning crazily, as if it would not stop until it devoured Yi Chen's soul. Absorb for me. A terrifying aura suddenly erupted from Yi Chen's body. A mystical suction force was born. This suction force did not devour the yellow spring storm, but rather the will of hell contained within it. In hell, all ghosts had the will of hell, just like the martial will of a martial artist. The difference was that one was innate, while the other was acquired. A large amount of the will of hell entered Yi Chen's soul. Yi Chen's soul began its second evolution. Yi Chen had no other choice. If he didn't absorb the will of hell, he wouldn't be able to break free from the yellow spring storm. After all, this yellow spring storm had gathered a large number of yellow spring's ghosts, and its power was boundless. No matter how strong his soul force was, it would still be devoured. After devouring a large amount of the will of hell, Yi Chen's body underwent a drastic change. First, the silver vertical eye on his forehead opened. In the next instant, this silver vertical eye split into two. The two silver vertical eyes appeared on Yi Chen's forehead, one on the left and one on the right. Their color gradually changed, from silver to crimson, then to golden red, and finally to pure gold. The pure gold vertical eye shifted downwards, fusing with Yi Chen's eyes. The intense pain caused Yi Chen to involuntarily close his eyes. Streams of blood flowed out from the slits of his eyes. Ah! An earth-shaking roar erupted as the yellow spring storm exploded. Only a figure floated in the air. Yi Chen's aura was still as sharp as before, like beams of sword qi shooting out. But this sharpness contained a pressure as vast as the sea of hell. At this moment, he was the center of this area. Crackle! Golden lightning danced. Yi Chen opened his eyes. His eyes were immeasurably deep, and his pupils were surrounded by a golden halo. If one looked closely, they could see two vortexes in Yi Chen's pupils. They were arranged in the shape of twin stars, slowly spinning. Seeing through spacetime. Is this the evolved form of the soul eye? After his space profound reached completion, although Yi Chen could see through space within a certain range, it didn't include spacetime. Moreover, he had to rely on space profound to sense it. It was like looking at a person through glass. But after his soul eye evolved, not only could Yi Chen see through spacetime, but he could also see what had happened not long ago. It was like a movie rewinding. This kind of eye had already touched upon the changes of time and space, and was born with both profound mysteries of space and time. However, Yi Chen didn't know what this eye was called. Up until now, he only knew of two kinds of evolved forms of the soul eye. One was the soul destruction heavenly eye, and the other was the soul enchanting divine eye. If some old antiques were here, they would definitely recognize that this pair of eyes was very similar to the legendary Netherworld Sacred Eye. The Netherworld Sacred Eye was born from the will of hell, and it was like a fish in water in hell. Any ghost that encountered it would be innately restrained. That was because it could absorb the will of hell. Without the will of hell, it was the same as turning into a walking corpse. Of course, the difference couldn't be too great. For example, if he encountered a ghost king, even if the Netherworld Sacred Eye was 10 times stronger, it would still be useless. The two sides simply weren't on the same level of life or soul. It seems it's still not strong enough. When the Netherworld Sacred Eye first formed, Yi Chen felt that its source power wasn't strong enough. It seemed he needed to absorb more of the will of hell. If he could nurture his own will of hell, then the Netherworld Sacred Eye would be the true Netherworld Sacred Eye. This was his instinctive belief that it was close to an inheritance. The yellow spring storms that others flocked to were undoubtedly a delicious meal in Yi Chen's eyes. He didn't even need to search for them. As long as the Netherworld Sacred Eye scanned them, he would be able to see where the yellow spring storms were. 1 storm, 2 storms, 3 storms in just 2 hours. Yi Chen had absorbed a total of 10 yellow spring storms. The will of hell in his eyes surged like the sea, and even Yi Chen couldn't control it. Wherever his eyes looked, he would feel a terrifying divine pressure. The last yellow spring storm was destroyed by Yi Chen's gaze. Chapter 1243. After absorbing 10 underworld storms, Yi Chen's Netherworld Sacred Eye had reached its limit. If he didn't consolidate it, he would explode from the underworld will. In his sea of soul, the Destruction Sword Soul and the Immortal Sword Soul were also trying to balance the new relationship. Previously, the world was divided into two, but now it was a tripartite balance. Yi Chen discovered that after this near-death experience, the Destruction Sword Intent and the Immortal Sword Intent had made great progress. They both broke through to the peak of the 7th step, only a step away from the 8th step. The 8th step of the Destruction Sword Intent and the Immortal Sword Intent were equivalent to ordinary 9th step Sword Intent. They had reached the limit of ordinary Sword Intent and were comparable to ordinary Supremes. According to the legends, when the Sword Domain reached the peak of the 9th level, one would have a trace of the power of Sword God. Similarly, when the Sword Intent reached the peak of the 9th step, one would also have a trace of the power of Sword God. It was unknown whether this Sword Intent was ordinary or attributed. Of course, no matter what, even if the ordinary Sword Intent reached the peak of the 9th step, it would have an unimaginable divine might. However, until now, no Supremes had been able to push their will and domain to the peak. The power of God wasn't that easy to obtain. A trace of coldness appeared in Yi Chen's eyes. He saw old ancestor Wuling leave the tower and move further away. Yi Chen naturally wouldn't let him go. His 4 friends were still in the enemy's hands. However, with his own strength, even if he used the Netherworld Sacred Eye, it was almost impossible to defeat him. If a quasi-venerable could be defeated with a pair of eyes, then it wouldn't be worth anything. Yi Chen's current strength could at most contend with a peak emperor, and the 5 elements power that old ancestor Wuling gave him had long been dissolved by the underworld storms. It couldn't increase Yi Chen's strength, and Yi Chen didn't need it. Although the 5 elements power could increase his strength, it was also a means for old ancestor Wuling to control him. However, this was hell. After absorbing the underworld will, Yi Chen discovered that he could control the underworld storms through the underworld will. The underworld storms could kill quasi-venerables, and Yi Chen could control the underworld storms. This meant that Yi Chen could kill quasi-venerables. That was how the world worked. In no time, Yi Chen controlled 3 yellow spring storms. With a flash, Yi Chen entered one of the yellow spring storms and led the other 2 yellow spring storms in pursuit of old ancestor Wuling. The speed of the yellow spring storm was much faster than Wuling Patriarch. After 5 minutes, Yi Chen could see Wuling Patriarch with his naked eyes. 3. Patriarch Wuling's pupils constricted. 5 elements escape. 5 colored light emanated from Patriarch Wuling's body, and his speed increased exponentially. He was like a 5-colored meteor. Do you think you can escape? Within the yellow spring storm, Yi Chen muttered. As soon as he finished speaking, the yellow spring storm's speed increased tenfold. This was a method of increasing speed at the cost of burning the power of ghosts and the will of hell. I'll fight you to the death. Seeing that he couldn't escape, Patriarch Wuling's ruthlessness surged. He turned around and slammed his palm at one of the yellow spring storms. The 5-colored palm contained the power of the 5 elements and was flawless. It was extremely destructive, even to ghosts. The yellow spring storm was a combination of countless yellow springs ghosts, and a portion of it was dispersed. However, the other 2 yellow spring storms took the opportunity to attack Patriarch Wuling. They could have devoured him, but he was protected by a layer of 5-colored light, and the yellow spring storm was deflected slightly. Boom, boom, boom. If the first time didn't work, the second time, the third time, gradually, the 5-colored light protecting Patriarch Wuling grew weaker and weaker. In the end, there was a popping sound like a bubble bursting. 5 elements seal. As one of the powerful quasi-venerables, Patriarch Wuling had countless powerful life-saving method. This time, the 5 elements seal wasn't used to seal the yellow spring storm. With his power, he could only seal 1 yellow spring storm at most, and he couldn't seal it for too long, let alone 3. He used the 5 elements seal to seal himself, which was equivalent to adding a protective barrier to himself. You do have some tricks up your sleeve. Yi Chen didn't want to waste too much time with his opponent. The netherworld's sacred eye flashed, and one of the yellow spring storms shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although it had shrunk in size, the yellow spring storm's density had increased countless times. It was like a spinning awl that stabbed at the seal. Crack! Cracks appeared on the 5 elements seal. Under Yi Chen's control, the other yellow spring storm also transformed into the same form. They attacked the 5 elements seal from the left and right. More and more cracks appeared on the 5 elements seal, and they spread out like a spider web. I haven't lived long enough. I can't die. Patriarch Wuling's eyes shone with a terrifying light. He waved his hand, and a miniature puppet array descended from the sky. Of course, a small puppet array couldn't stop the yellow spring storm from devouring him. Patriarch Wuling pointed at his chest, and with a puff, a thick arrow of blood spurted out. The arrow of blood didn't land on the ground, but floated in the air. Patriarch Wuling pointed his finger, and the arrow of blood turned into blood-colored runes. Buzz! When the so-called blood-colored runes were born, a ring of light mixed with blood and 5 colors spread out. Circle after circle, it was like ripples in the water. I will use the price of 90% of my remaining lifespan to summon the puppet True God's Will. Patriarch Wuling shouted loudly. The puppet True God's Will. Yi Chen's eyes were solemn. He didn't believe that Patriarch Wuling could summon the true puppet True God's Will, but as long as there was a remnant, it was terrifying enough. The power of a true god wasn't limited to the surface. They could change the world and turn the impossible into the possible. Even a trace of remnant will had terrifying power. For the first time, the space of hell fluctuated. A huge shadow appeared from the void, and it enveloped Patriarch Wuling. This shadow was expressionless, and its eyes were a mass of emptiness. But when Yi Chen looked at this mass of emptiness, his mind immediately became muddled, and he felt like he had forgotten everything. So strange. Yi Chen didn't dare to look anymore. Haha, so what if it's the yellow spring storm? This is my final trump card. If a person blocks, I will kill him. If a god blocks, I will kill a god. Patriarch Wuling seemed to have gone mad. This method of summoning the puppet true god's will was the highest profound meaning of the heaven-seizing puppet secret technique. He didn't summon the puppet true god's will, but he gathered the remnant of the puppet true god's will in the human world. The moment it became a true god, a part of its will would be integrated into the universe and become a part of it. Those miracles were the manifestation of the true god's will. However, the true god's will couldn't be controlled. Even if it was a remnant, it wasn't something that mortals could touch. Patriarch Wuling had used up 90% of his remaining lifespan to barely gather a bit of it. As for whether it would be assimilated by the puppet true god's will, he didn't care. Why did you summon me? The illusory figure's words startled old ancestor Wuling and Yi Chen. Patriarch Wuling swallowed his saliva. He pointed at the 3 yellow spring storms and said, "Help me end them. It's best if you can turn them into puppet storms." The shadow glanced at the 3 yellow spring storms. "Sure, but you don't have enough life force." Suddenly, Patriarch Wuling screamed. His entire body was sucked away at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was integrated into the shadow, and the shadow became slightly more solid. Chapter 1244. Yi Chen's pupils shrank. Wuling old ancestor was already dead. He didn't know if the 5-element space was still there. As for the puppet true god's will, it was obviously not an inanimate object. Thinking about it, it made sense. The will of a true god was not something mortals could imagine. It was not wrong to say that it was one of the billions of incarnations of a true god. The illusory figure, which had become a bit more solid, looked at the Yellow Springs Tempest. His gaze ignored everything and directly looked at Yi Chen. "Interesting little fellow. You actually awakened the netherworld divine eyes. With this pair of eyes you are like half the master of hell. The 4 failed puppets inside the 5-element space should be your friends, right? Here you go." The shadow stretched out his right hand and opened it. A 5-colored ball of light slowly floated towards Yi Chen. "I have already unlocked the puppet secret technique on them. Being refined into puppets is good for them and bad for them. The good is that the mysteries of the 5 elements are imprinted in the depths of their souls. The bad is that there is still a trace of this person's will hidden in the depths of their souls. One day, when this will is strong enough, it is not impossible for it to possess their souls." Yi Chen nodded. Indeed, as the shadow had said, being refined into a puppet allowed him to know some mysteries of the 5 elements. In the future, it would be much easier to create supreme techniques related to the 5 elements. However, he did not understand why the shadow did not kill him. Wasn't he summoned by Wuling Old Ancestor? Although Wuling Old Ancestor had already been killed by him. The shadow seemed to know Yi Chen's question. "Come out. These 3 yellow spring storms are mine." Hearing this, Yi Chen thought that it was like that. Wuling Old Ancestor did not know that he was in the Yellow Spring Storm, so the purpose of summoning the puppet true god's will was to refine the Yellow Spring Storm into a puppet. The puppet true god knew that Yi Chen was in the Yellow Spring Storm, but for some reason, it did not make things difficult for Yi Chen. Holding the 5-element space in his hand, Yi Chen walked out of the Yellow Spring Storm. The illusory figure waved his hand, and the 3 yellow spring storms fused together, becoming an even larger one. Shortly after, this yellow spring storm began to compress, fusing with the illusory figure. In the end, a primal chaos illusory figure appeared, but its eyes were still empty. Crackle! In the instant that all of this was completed, the sky suddenly crackled with lightning. The lightning was pitch black, and a powerful voltage was applied to Yi Chen's body. Yi Chen felt his body go numb, and his soul was on the verge of collapsing. "Not good, what kind of lightning is this?" Yi Chen hurriedly flew far away to avoid being affected. It was obvious that the pitch-black lightning was directed at the puppet True God's will and had nothing to do with him. Even the apocalyptic thunderbolt has appeared. Don't worry, I won't challenge your authority. The chaotic shadow took a step forward and disappeared from this world. As the chaotic shadow left, the black lightning also gradually disappeared, as if nothing had happened. The 5 elemental space belonged to Wuling Forefather. When Wuling Forefather died, the soul imprint on it became much weaker. Without much effort, Yi Chen erased the soul imprint that belonged to Wuling Forefather and replaced it with his own. What happened? Ancestor Wuling is dead. The moment they were released, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others asked with lingering fear. Yi Chen nodded and explained what happened next. That was close. Fortunately, that old guy is dead. Otherwise, we'd be under his control for the rest of our lives. Yeah, it was really too dangerous this time. A paragon is indeed a paragon. He simply couldn't resist. Our strength is far from enough. The Scarlet Wind Emperor's face was gloomy. Anyone who almost became a puppet for the rest of their lives would be in a bad mood, not to mention that the Scarlet Wind Emperor was a dignified emperor. Stone Emperor said, "Supreme Holy Land will open in 80 years. At that time, as long as one is at the 8th layer of life and death realm, they can enter. We'll strive to reach the 8th layer within 80 years and enter the Supreme Holy Land together." That's right. Supreme Holy Land usually opens once every 10,000 years. This time, it's 2,000 years early. If we miss this chance, the next time will be 10,000 years later. The Fire Sparrow Emperor nodded. Yi Chen said, "Supreme Holy Land opens in 80 years? He hadn't heard anything about Supreme Holy Land. Snow Air Emperor explained, "Supreme Holy Land is the graveyard of deceased paragons. Almost all the deceased paragons of the 4 Great Life starfields are inside. Due to the special rules of Supreme Holy Land, the corpses of paragons will not decay, and their chi and blood will not deteriorate. Their bodies still contain powerful energy and will. If one can obtain the inheritance of a paragon, it can save countless years of hard work." Scarlet Wind Emperor continued, "The closer one gets to the center of Supreme Holy Land, the more powerful the pressure of a paragon becomes. Ordinary emperors can only seek opportunities in the periphery, and only the truly powerful emperors can enter. It's said that there are many corpses of supreme paragons in the center of Supreme Holy Land. There are even corpses of paragons who dominated an era." Yi Chen nodded. The corpses of paragons from ancient to modern times were all inside, so there were bound to be some heaven-defying paragons. However, he didn't know what the inheritance of a paragon was. If he accepted the inheritance, he would have no choice but to walk the path of the paragons. If it was only a kind of power that could be transformed into his own in the future, Yi Chen could accept it. After all, even if he wasn't powerful, others would be powerful. Moreover, power was power. It was very simple. From birth, people began to learn other people's things. Let's leave this place first. Hell was too dangerous. Even paragons were in a precarious situation here, not to mention them. Yi Chen didn't expect to obtain any treasures here. He only wanted to find the exit as soon as possible. In order not to drag Yi Chen down, the 4 entered the 5 elements space again. After a week, Yi Chen returned to the foot of the Crying Ghost Mountain. Originally, with Yi Chen's strength, it was impossible for him to come out alive. However, he had the Netherworld Sacred Eye. Ordinary ghosts were completely suppressed. Even that ghost beast, which was comparable to a second-level mountain ghost, couldn't do anything to Yi Chen. Every time it pounced on him, it would be dispirited and listless by the Netherworld's Sacred Eye's hell will. "Hey, one came out? So weak?" On the guest platform, the eyes of the skull flickered endlessly. Yi Chen walked over and sized up the skull. After confirming that the other party could think, he asked, "Do you know where the exit to hell is?" "Why should I tell you? Unless you give me 50 ghost stones." "Sure. Give me the ghost stones first. Tell me first, then I'll give them to you. Fine, if you lie to me, I'll swallow you alive. The skull didn't believe that Yi Chen would play any tricks. Although it was bound here, if it wanted to swallow a puny human, it was too easy. It couldn't do anything to those quasi-venerables from before. Walk 50 billion li in that direction, and there'll be an exit. As for whether it's the entrance you came in from, I don't know. Are you sure? Yi Chen was a little skeptical. Hand over the 50 ghost stones. The eyes of the skull burned fiercely. I don't dare to confirm whether what you said is true or not. How about this, when I confirm it's true, I'll give it to you. Yi Chen turned and flew in the direction indicated by the skull. You're courting death. The skull was furious. It opened its pitch-black mouth, and a pitch-black storm swept toward Yi Chen. Facing the pitch-black storm, a golden light flashed in Yi Chen's eyes. Pooh, the storm suddenly dissipated, and a terrifying hell will rush toward the skull. The skull screamed, and the fire in its eyes dimmed. How is this possible? This is the Netherworld Sacred Eye. You're a human, how can you have the Netherworld Sacred Eye? I hope what you said is true. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Yi Chen's figure flashed, and he instantly disappeared. The exit is naturally true, but every exit is guarded by Netherworld ghosts. You can't leave. No, he has the Netherworld Sacred Eye, why would he be afraid of Netherworld ghosts? For a moment, the skull was extremely distressed. Chapter 1245. This exit is indeed real. With the Netherworld Sacred Eye, Yi Chen could easily see whether the exit was real or fake. As for the Nether ghosts guarding the exit, he directly ignored them. As long as they weren't Grade 2 mountain ghosts or above, no ghost was a threat to him. As for Grade 3 mountain ghosts, they were at best a ferocious beast. It would be difficult to defeat them, but it wouldn't take too much effort to get rid of them. With a flash, Yi Chen escaped into the hazy passageway. At the end of the passageway, a black figure was faintly discernible. Behind him was a white barrier with flowing water waves and threatening cold air. Just as the black figure was about to attack Yi Chen, a golden light flashed, and the black figure instantly turned into nothingness. Pop! Yi Chen passed through the white barrier. So cold. Is this the depths of the heavenly river? Yi Chen had experienced this kind of cold in the depths of the heavenly river, and it got colder the deeper he went. The calm water contained the changes of time and space. Without enough strength, it was impossible to find the way out. This was a huge island, and in the center of the island was a lake. Suddenly, a pillar of water erupted from the center of the lake, and a figure broke out of the water. The figure was Yi Chen. So it's the lake of the island. After looking around for a while, Yi Chen understood. It was obvious that this place was similar to the volcanic island, an entrance to hell. After leaving hell, Yi Chen released the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others. We're out. The outside world is still the best. The Scarlet Wind Emperor heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. The Snow Air Emperor hesitated. I don't know if this is a Grade 5 tributary. If not, it'll be even more difficult to leave the Heavenly River. Although the Grade 5 tributary of the Heavenly River was vast and boundless, it was still possible to leave in 3 to 5 years. If one was lucky, 1 or 2 years would be enough. If it was a Grade 4 tributary, it would take at least 10 times more time. If it was a Grade 3 tributary, or even a Grade 2 tributary, or even the main branch, it wasn't a matter of time. If one's realm wasn't high enough, they wouldn't be able to leave for a lifetime. Legend had it that ordinary supremes would be trapped for countless years if they entered the main branch of the Heavenly River, unless they reached a profound realm in the profound meaning of time and space. It doesn't matter. This is still a 5th grade tributary. I can see the boundary at the edge of the Heavenly River. As for how far the Netherworld Sacred Eye could see, Yi Chen didn't have a concrete idea. However, compared to the Soul Eye, the Netherworld Sacred Eye's ability was more than 1,000,000 times stronger. Millions of li could only be seen within a few inches, while the Soul Eye's range was only a billion li. It could be said that the netherworld's sacred eye itself had the property of space and time. Combined with Yi Chen's perfect space profound, the range of his vision was unimaginable. After spending half a year, Yi Chen's group of 5 finally left the Sky River and arrived in outer space. This was mainly because the space-time in the Heavenly River was ever-changing. Sometimes it could be sped up and sometimes it would be slowed down. "We're finally out." At this moment, the 5 of them felt as if a lifetime had passed. The Heavenly River was still too dangerous for them. Being able to come out alive could be said to be a stroke of luck. However, they wouldn't be so lucky every time. This time, if not for Yi Chen, they would have all become puppets, living a life worse than death. Emperor Dao's spirit root belongs to the fated. I won't think about it anymore. This time, I'll go into closed-door training. I won't come out until I break through to the 8th layer. Another few months passed, and the 5 arrived at White Tiger Starfield. Stone Emperor bid farewell to the 4. Next, Fire Sparrow Emperor, Scarlet Wind Emperor, and Snow Air Emperor also bid farewell to Yi Chen. Supreme Holy Land's opening was imminent. Apart from Scarlet Wind Emperor, the others all wanted to break through to the 8th layer within 80 years. Scarlet Wind Emperor was also not satisfied with his current strength, so he also wanted to increase his strength after returning. Finally, only Yi Chen was left. 8th layer life and death realm. No rush. I'll first digest the mysteries of the 5 elements' power. Although there were still 80 years before the opening of Supreme Holy Land, which was not enough time for anyone, Yi Chen wasn't in a hurry to increase his cultivation base. He had to wait until his foundation was solid enough, and he had 100% chance of breaking through. Right now, the most important thing was to digest the mysteries of old ancestor Wuling's 5 elements power. The sooner he could comprehend it, the sooner he could create his own supreme 5 elements sword art. Hell Ghost Whale Mountain. Old Man Yin Yang, Grandma Night Ghost, Vigorous Ancestor, and Golden Light Ancestor followed in old ancestor Wuling's footsteps and were all annihilated. Of course, old ancestor Wuling was killed by the true god puppet's will, while the others died under the endless Yellow Springs tempest. This was merely the 41st floor. Nobody knew what kind of dangers lay in the 42nd to the 49th floor. Perhaps this place was originally a forbidden area of hell. The will of the puppet true god, the only one who could enter and leave freely and no one could stop him, had no interest in this place. He had already gone to an unknown place. There was no one in the world who could detect the traces of the true god's will, even if it was just the remnant will left behind by the puppet true god. 50 years passed in the blink of an eye. On a desolate planet near planet Flaming Star in the Vermilion Bird star region, a destructive sword aura erupted into the sky. Everything in its path was shattered and annihilated. Doomsday Calamity. After spending 50 years, Yi Chen finally created his own supreme sword art, Doomsday Calamity. Fusing 4 types of profoundness and fusing 5 types of mutually reinforcing and restraining profoundness were not on the same level. The latter was hundreds or thousands of times more difficult. Even with Yi Chen's comprehension ability and old ancestor Wuling's 5 elements power, it took Yi Chen a full 50 years. Doomsday Calamity, which contained the power of the 5 elements, was thousands of times more powerful than the Doomsday Meteor Sword. At this moment, Yi Chen finally had the strength to fight against a quasi-venerable. Of course, although he had created Doomsday Calamity, it was far from reaching perfection. Fusing 5 types of mutually reinforcing and restraining profoundness was too difficult. A mere 50 years was not enough. Yi Chen could only fuse a little bit of it, which was only the tip of the iceberg. Even old ancestor Wuling's 5 elements palm technique was only the tip of the iceberg. Apart from supremes, almost no one could comprehend a supreme martial art to perfection. Back in the dragon race, Yi Chen had seen the image of the green-robed emperor in the image recording crystal. although it was not a supreme martial art but a fifth revolution martial art that contained the 5 profoundness of metal, wood, water, fire, and wind. The green-robed emperor had fused these 5 profoundness to a very high degree. This was much more powerful than old ancestor Wuling's 5 elements palm technique. A supreme martial art was an extremely difficult path. On the contrary, 5th revolution martial arts and 6th revolution martial arts could improve much faster. However, one's potential was limited. Which one to choose depended on the individual's situation. After 50 years, my foundation has more or less solidified. But it's still not enough. I haven't reached the critical point yet. 50 years of cultivation had made Yi Chen's foundation incomparably firm. At this moment, he had 80 to 90% chance of breaking through. If it were someone else, they would have already started breaking through. However, Yi Chen had higher requirements for himself. His goal was not only the 8th life and death realm, but also the 9th life and death realm. One wrong step, and every step would be wrong. He would not make such a mistake.